All right, thank you, and welcome to the Monday, November 8th City Commission study session. We've got 3 different topics on our, well, actually 4 different topics to cover at our study session today. So I will turn it over to City Manager Mike Scragg or to Jim
I'll keep it real brief. If you've looked at the PowerPoint presentation at all, you know that annually we do a plan update as it relates to solid waste, so that will certainly be one topic, but I commend Jim and all their effort to kind of take that conversation further into what the future might hold for us and help give you a bigger picture. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim Toich, Public Works Director.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, Jim Toich, Director of Public Works. My comments will be really brief. I kind of want to echo a little bit of what Mike said and say, first and foremost, if we leave here with one thing, that is for you to know that we intend to bring back a request to approve the 2021 Solid Waste Management Annual Review next week. And so a good portion of this presentation is to discuss the current 10-year planning cycle that we are now at the 5-year mark, and to provide an update as to the 8 original goals from the Solid Waste Management Plan as they were written in 2017 and the status of each of those 8 goals. And then Jim is also going to introduce a topic about the next 10-year planning period, which will start in 2022. But I think that's primarily what we're hoping to do. And I think the other thing that I'm interested in is making sure you understand the process that we are using and what that means in terms of the industry, what other municipalities in Kansas and around the country are doing with their solid waste management plans, and how that drives what we would like to do in the future. I think one comment that I would like to share, Commissioner Peck, you had made a comment several months ago, and not just your comments, but obviously when we design a system, we want to pay attention to what you tell us. And you had made the comment about when we were talking about the waste characterization study that you don't mind doing it, but if we do it, you would expect us to not put it on a shelf and not use it. So the other thing that I hope that comes away from this presentation is that you get an understanding and appreciation for how staff does the exact opposite of that, that we don't put it on the shelf, that we use it in every aspect of every decision that we make regarding solid waste in Saline County. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. I'm Jim Kowach. I'm the Operations Manager for Public Works, and work closely with Jim Toich. But also in the gallery here, we have Sean Dunstan, our Sanitation Superintendent, Larry Hammonds, our Solid Waste Superintendent, and Phil Black is the chairman of our Solid Waste Committee. So we've got, we're fully represented. We're going to talk about the annual update, which some of you have been through before. It's just an approval of the addendums to the current plan. And then every 5 years, we go through a deep review every 5 years of our 10-year plan. And we're actually required to hold a public hearing and announce it to the public and share our goals and vision with them. So, and we plan on doing that next year. So this is kind of the 4th year of just giving annual updates. Now there's a pretty important update that we need you folks to weigh in on, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But the other thing that's kind of exciting is we have a waste characterization and recyclables composition study that we were able to get a grant for, and actually begins next week. So we will be sorting our trash next week and a representative sample of our recyclables to see what the current composition and breakdown of that is. So we're going to talk about that quite a bit. We are in hopes of using that waste characterization study and the data that we see as far as trend lines from the previous studies that we've done in 2004 and 1997 to try to make some strategic waste reduction strategies. in the future. And then because there was so much information that we need to share with you, we actually broke today's presentation into two pieces. We'll meet again with you in 2 weeks, but in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about the capital improvements we need to make for safe sanitation collection and the storage and protection of our sanitation equipment, some equipment needs. Along with that, we're going to talk about, and we've done a lot of analysis on all of the capital needs for the landfill for the next 25 years. So we're going to talk about new cell construction, closure, post-closure costs, landfill gas collection, the equipment needs, and then the other capital needs. So it's a big picture of what we see coming down the road as far as managing our municipal landfill, and then the fee structure that we're going to need to have to support that. And that's going to be in 2 weeks. We'll touch on it briefly today. Next slide, please. First and foremost, our Solid Waste Management Committee is required by statute to annually review our solid waste plan. As you know, we're the representative for Saline County. The city is the representative for Saline County Solid Waste Management Plan. We have to do an annual update, and then every 5 years, we're required to hold a public hearing. And just as a side note, as part of the annual review, the Solid Waste Management Plan, the committee is to develop and schedule for waste reduction and diversion for Saline County. And that is something that the committee has talked about quite a bit at the previous meetings this year, and they've prepared a goal to add to the plan that we need you folks to weigh in on. In the notes pages, for those of you that have those, they are published online as well. It's just the references to the state statutes as far as the purpose of the Solid Waste Committee. First off, the solid waste management planning cycle. We're here today to talk about the 1-year update, but we work on this year-round, and then as we'll demonstrate, we use this plan year-round to guide kind of our day-to-day actions and the decisions that we're making. We're required to do an annual review, and then our actual plan is a great big 3-ring binder with all kinds of previous action that the commission has made. And we take that and we incorporate just addendums on an annual basis up until the 5-year plan, and then we incorporate those changes, we rewrite it, we analyze our goals, and we kind of reset the baseline and hold a public hearing, and then we continue. But every 5 years, we're reviewing our 10-year plan. So we're going to report progress on our current 10-year plan, and then also at least set the baseline or where we'd like to head with the next 10-year plan. From that 5-year review, we really want to develop some new goals and strategies for how we're managing solid waste in Saline County, but then also develop some waste reduction strategies that make sense for our community. And then we want to implement those goals and make them part of the plan. So we've got a proposal for that. As far as our solid waste management current plan, I know a few of you have spoken in the past that you want to represent the state being leaders as far as environmentally friendly or conscientious community. And I think we've obtained that status, that the current plan that we have is well respected by the Solid Waste Bureau of Solid Waste Management with KDHE. And they actually attended one of our committee meetings earlier this year, and they're the ones that recommended we apply for a grant to actually help pay for our solid waste characterization.
Yeah, if I could interject here, I really want to give kudos to Phil, who had the foresight to invite the KDHE to participate. We were very fortunate in that work session that we hold every spring that the current bureau director took him up on that offer and attended that meeting. And that action resulted in us discussing how we intended to implement the waste characterization study into future waste reduction strategies, which then drives the 10-year plan. and the KDHE was extraordinarily interested in that. In fact, they intend to take the data from the waste characterization study and turn it into technical guidance for all of the municipal solid waste landfills in the state of Kansas. But I do want to say kudos to Phil for bringing that to the forefront with the KDHE, because it led to, that conversation led to, as Jim mentioned, a successful grant.
Thank you very much, Phil. Well done.
That grant was in excess of $48,000, so we're excited to get started on it. We had to postpone the original start date because of the paperwork involved with getting it approved, but we're actually going to do it next week, so we're excited to get that done. Next slide. In the current plan that was developed 5 years ago, there were 8 broad categories of problem areas: issues, discussions, and recommendations. This was done 5 years ago, and then just through the next few slides, we want to show you the progress that we've made on these 8 categories. And hopefully you'll see that we're over 50% complete. So there are some broad categories that we've made a lot of progress on. We went through a lot of discussions with a lot of you folks about curbside recycling, automated collection, whether or not to have alley routes that you probably got tired of seeing us the last 5 years. But we've been here ever since the business plan was approved in 2017. Next slide. Just to make it a little easier to read, the first 4 of those goals are listed here at the top. We had an extraordinary problem staffing our waste collection team. Very physical job, very dangerous job. Since we were exploring going to automation, we didn't want to hire too many folks full-time and then have to lay people off when we did switch to automation. So we were in limbo for a couple, 3 years where we used a lot of temporaries. And as an example, Sean and Tommy, the folks that manage that system, they used over 200 different individuals to staff 10 positions.
Wow.
So it's just, they were always training people. They didn't last very long. They were training new people, and it was a revolving door. So with going to automation, our collection staff is not going to be a problem. I don't want to say we're out of the woods, because any industry that utilizes commercial driver's licenses is at risk right now. There's extreme competition, and the prices keep going up. It's hit us on our street side of it, but our sanitation side is at full strength right now. We just hope that it stays that way.
And Jim at the podium, we're not having to utilize any temporary workers? They're all
We
They're
kept
all
our
full-time?
temporary staff on for an extended period of time until we got the second carts delivered. And then also for a 3-week period to distribute extra flyers on the mistakes that people were making, setting out their carts so that they would be educated. But October 18th was the first week that we've quit collecting stuff outside the carts, or if they were extremely full. We gave flyers out for an additional week, and then we've just started 0 temporaries on staff for sanitation.
Thank you.
So it's been a long road.
How has the response been from the public? If this is a good time to respond to that?
Yeah, no, initially there was a lot of consternation about not being able to set stuff outside the carts, especially if they couldn't order new carts, because we got a lot more orders than we thought we would. We had to wait for delivery of those. But Sean and Tommy have collected an extraordinary amount of information on the number of flyers that they've been setting out on a daily and weekly basis, and that number continues to go down. For stuff that's not 3 feet apart, stuff that the lid's open, stuff that is not turned the right way or is too far from the curb, it's parked behind a car. We've got a number of categories. We have data on every one of those, and the number keeps going down. And of course, there's still a few people upset that we don't do it the old way, but those complaints, the phone calls for the first month and a half or 2 months were ridiculous when the carts were being delivered and people weren't getting the right number of carts and some of those problems. But the phone calls, our office is quiet again, so we think that's a good sign.
The other thing I would say is we did a lot of research with other communities that had already automated, and I guess the one big point that we took away from our discussions with those communities was that plan to have 6 months to a year of a lot of turmoil and a lot of difficulty and stuff. And I guess my role here today is to give people kudos, but I really want to thank Mr. Dunstan and Mr. Highsmith and all of the sanitation workers and also our new employee, the E3 coordinator, who is currently in a meeting. Oh, she is here. So she's already here. And, due to their efforts, I think we are far, far, far ahead of the curve compared to a lot of different municipalities.
I know we kept the alley service because we were concerned about losing customers. Did we have much of a loss of customers by going to the automated?
The mayor asked me that 2 weeks ago. I gave her the answer last week, and I'm going to struggle to remember the numbers exactly. I want to say it was like 261 customers, if I recall. But something changed in the system in that because we priced our second carts so low, we made it affordable for people. Despite losing those customers, the revenue is actually positive to a fairly significant degree, about $40,000 on an annual basis. And I have to believe that as customers learn the system and get used to the guidelines, that I think those numbers, we're going to see a continued increase in the number of customers that we have. And I would fully expect us to regain those customers that we lost. So, yeah.
What is the total customer base currently?
It's right at about 15,000 customers.
Okay.
Yeah, we were at 15.3, and we're just floating right around 15 now. That it's hard to track because we assume that the number we lost, but every month we lose and gain customers that are moving around and then starting at new addresses. But about 300, and I don't know what the percentage is, but that's really low out of 15,000.
And I do have to say that the public,
1.7%, yeah, that's pretty low.
our citizens have been, they also deserve a lot of credit because we have completely changed a system that had been in place for more than 40 years, and they adapted extraordinarily well. And as Jim pointed out, those numbers of people that are having difficulties are going down every week.
Yep. The other thing is just the folks that used to run behind the trucks and actually run, because we had 600 stops a day per truck. We had automated numbers with our semi-automated staff. They worked really hard for the city, but they had extremely difficult jobs and very dangerous. That it's one of the 5th most dangerous jobs in the country as far as sanitation collection. So by going to the automated side-loaded equipment, we've eliminated that job or that hazard for not only our employees, but the public that may or may not be aware of those people moving to and from and trying to stop short or swerve around them. It's actually safer for everyone. So we feel like employee safety and public safety was vastly improved with our automated collection.
And for any of the public listening, we did that without losing a single full-time employee.
One of the focus areas this last time was the actual waste disposal and recycling rates for the community or the county. We have a per capita rating, which we'll go into on another slide, that's higher than average. The only thing we want to remind folks about is the average is for the state. So Kansas City has a much higher average than the western 2/3 of the state, which are smaller communities like us. So we're above the statewide average, but very representative for a city this size.
Does that include industrial waste that would come into the?
No,
Bill?
it does not include industrial and commercial. It does include residential and retail. And then the final thing that was identified back in 2017 was the closure of the only residential recycling facility in the city at that time, which was Images. And we came up with a quickly came up with a short-term solution that has really grown, and we're going to go into some of the details about our drive-through recycling center.
And we also have Mr. Brinegar here, who is with the SDRC, and I certainly want to give him praise for taking ownership of the facility. I don't know of another city program I've ever seen that has as much positive public feedback as those guys get, and it's all due to the work that he and others have put into that facility.
Okay. Next slide, please. Here's just some more information or data, and there are some footnotes on there. To your point, Commissioner Hoppick, the landfill information does not include industrial construction or demolition or out-of-county storage, but that it does include residential, retail, and some commercial. So it's kind of, it does include some commercial, but I can't tell you specifically which part of it is. And we had not only talked internally, but talking to the Bureau of Waste Management's former director and a couple of his key environmentalists, they felt like we were right where the community should be at that time, and didn't see an issue with the per capita or pounds per person that was actually being recorded here for the city of Salina.
One of the things that the environmental scientists both pointed out to us, that the director, Bill Bider, at the time pointed out to me, was that because we are a regional retail city, we have to understand that we're comparing ourselves to a great number of very small communities that pretty much just have transfer stations and C&D landfills, construction and demolition landfills. And so if you go to a city like Salina or Topeka or Kansas City or Wichita or one of those, you would expect to see the number higher than the state average. It is all those other communities in Kansas, the much smaller communities, that have far lower numbers, and that's what's driving the state average. But all three vehemently insisted that they fully expect Salina and cities like us to be above this amount.
And all
A
the,
question, could I ask a question there?
Absolutely.
Commissioner Ryan here, does that mean that the industrial construction and out-of-county tonnage is not going into our landfill? And that's kind of part one, and then if it is, wouldn't it be useful long-term and the eventual filling of that landfill to know those numbers? Are we relatively more like the rural or the urban areas as far as the total amount of waste going into our landfill?
Commissioner Ryan, what I would say in response to that is, first, yes, those wastes are going into the landfill, but for the purposes of per capita waste disposal, pounds per person per day, they do not take those wastes into consideration when they're determining this number. They simply want to look at the amount of households, the population, and then the amount of tonnage that exists in that waste. I will say that all of our solid waste work groups, and the landfill is certainly no exception, keeps a tremendous amount of records. And one of the things that we pay close attention to is the amount of commercial and industrial waste compared to just normal household standard municipal waste. So yes, we do track those numbers, and commercial and industrial waste does represent a fairly significant amount of waste that is in the Saline County landfill.
Are those separated in the landfill, or do they all go into the same hole?
Eventually, yes, they all go in the same hole.
Okay, thank you.
okay, the only other thing we'd like to point out on this slide is it doesn't, the waste that we're recycling or going through our recycling center doesn't make up for the difference mathematically, but it does, it's interesting to see that ever since we have opened the SDRC, our per capita rates are going down. So the tonnage is one factor, but we think just public education and awareness is another. another factor that may be reducing that number. Next slide. This is the good story about the SDRC is our Salina Drive-Through Recycling Center. That's our acronym for it, but it's been open about 3 years. Here's 3 years' worth of data. The flat red line there represents COVID, where we were closed for 11 to 12 weeks. So we were not accepting waste at that time, and many people stored as much as they could, so we had a pretty good spike right after we opened. But unfortunately, we were closed long enough, most people chose to landfill their recyclables during that period. But we're enjoying about an 18% increase in tonnage and a 22% increase in customers since we've opened. Our curbside recycling that we used to support here for the city collected about 150 tons a year. Currently, our recycling center is collecting about 650 tons a year. So we went up about 500 tons a year as far as the diversion of waste. That we continue, or we expect this rate of increase to continue as the community gets more aware and we advertise more on social media. You may see our ads on the Tony's Event Center board and on the radio. We have a media budget that we try to inform people about our hours and when we're open. A lot of that, and she's here now, so I want to introduce her formally. Sydney Johnson is our Environmental Education and Enforcement Coordinator, and she's been doing a super job ever since joining us earlier this year. She's going to work closely with our consultant on the waste characterization study next week, and we hope that she works closely with them on the next phase of this, which will be development of the waste reduction strategies to further expand recycling and diversion in this county. So,
Welcome, Sydney.
next slide. The last 5 categories on the current plan. As you may recall, we used to have a yard waste collection program here in the city, and along with that, there came some restrictions on what could and couldn't be collected. You could basically have grass, leaves, and sticks up to the size of a pencil. So it was pretty restrictive on what we actually accepted in those bins. We had a hard time, there again, like the sanitation department, getting enough staff to actually man that effort. And the last couple of years, it was hit and miss as far as collections of yard waste, and we were forced to commingle that. We finally, in 2018, we eliminated that service from the city. So this issue actually kind of drops off the board as far as restrictions for yard waste. But the city commission, as well as many of the citizens here in town, felt like we still needed a greener solution on what to do with our yard waste. So we've been very interested in looking at composting again, establishing some sort of site here in the city or out at the landfill, and anticipate during our next consultant contract, which is a 3-year period, that we would explore a composting site, which I know Jim Teutsch has looked into it pretty extensively. It involves a lot of regulations as far as the ground, the groundwater, the runoff, all of the things that go along with that, to do it and get it permitted properly. Number 6, insufficient storage and sanitation of our collection vehicles and equipment, and we're going to go into this one in great detail at the November 22nd study session. That we didn't have enough storage for our old trucks, and now that we've got new trucks, they're too big to put in our shop to service them. They're too big to put in our wash bay to wash them, and they're too big to put in our sheds to store them overnight. So we have a problem, and we're going to propose a solution here in a couple weeks.
And I guess I would just want to reiterate for public benefit, if nothing else, that this is a problem we recognized before we automated. It was first put into the solid waste management plan in 2017. It was a problem then, and it was one of the 8 from the last 10-year cycle. And our intent is to offer a solution to fix that problem so that we can move on to the next 10-year plan.
Okay, number 7, and this is also in the current 10-year plan, but it's illegal dumping, littering, and accumulation of waste. And this is a whole combination of issues for the community. One is just the litter that blows out of the landfill or vehicles headed to the landfill. Some of it is illegal dumping that we're very cognizant of keeping our landfill rates reasonable, because the higher your landfill rates are, the higher the expectancy of people just to go dump in the county somewhere, or down by the river, or illegal dumping. So we try to keep our landfill rates as low as possible, educate people on proper disposal. We see this as another area that is just ongoing, and that our E3 coordinator will continue to educate the public on. And as far as city commission action, this is one that, and we've talked about it quite a bit, that Salina or Saline County does not charge anything for loads that aren't tarped headed to the landfill. Many landfills here in town, or here in the state of Kansas, charge a fee, an extra fee, because they're responsible for cleaning up the roadways and stuff, as well as their own property. I know in Shawnee County, it's double the tipping fee if it's not tarped. So it's something that we're going to explore more, and we may ask the commission to consider some sort of formal action in the next year.
I would point out, though, to the other haulers in Salina, to their credit, they're not a driver in this problem. They abide by the idea that their loads have to be tarped and closed, and I think the majority of the litter is coming from, open pickup trucks carrying loads to the landfill and things like that. The other commercial haulers in Salina do a good job at keeping their trash inside their trucks.
And then the final item, we've been keeping a very close eye on our landfill emission rates. There was the threat of a regulatory change, and they actually enacted that earlier this year. So the threshold for required collection of landfill gas has been lowered from 50 megagrams to 34 megagrams per year. We're still under that, and we're going to go into a lot of detail next time about the possibility of having to start collecting that landfill. Our testing period will be in 2031, and actually we may have to start build it and maintain it starting in 2033. So that's sooner than 10 years from now. So
And we're being conservative and preparing for worst-case scenario, which we believe would be 2033. In all likelihood, though, we'll probably stay under the threshold even then. And so we have room in our numbers to be able to adjust. In all likelihood, if we were to reach that number, it's probably more like 2038 rather than 2033.
Forgive my ignorance, but this would be methane.
Correct.
Okay. Can you speak a little bit to that collection process?
If you don't mind, we're going to go into fairly good detail on the next presentation on landfill gas collection. But in short, we would install.
It's all right.
Okay.
yeah, it's a significant construction effort, and then even operating it after that. But it's pretty simple. You just put pipes in the ground to collect the gas, and the gas has to be captured. And then at the current time, you can flare that gas. We don't know in the next 5 to 10 years if that'll even be possible. You may have to collect it, compress it, and reuse it. So,
Is there some sort of market for that?
there is, but to build, we're outside of any reasonable pipelines, that we don't produce enough gas to even pay for the pipeline to get it. So we may collect enough in the future to compress and reuse, maybe have natural gas powered vehicles at the landfill or something of that sort, heat our buildings. That's kind of the volume we're looking at.
Okay.
Yeah, there's two possible options. One is we find a business that's interested in using that gas that would co-locate on landfill property that is not part of the permitted landfill, which is available. Or two, we install microturbines that convert the methane into natural gas And we would recommend then going to natural gas sanitation trucks and use the gas to power our sanitation trucks. So there's a couple of very good options. The third option is that we would tie into the state gas lines, and then you get a market rate for the amount of gas that you put into the system. The challenge with that is the distance that you have to go to connect, and that gas pipe is extraordinarily expensive to put in. So, but there are several options that we can look at.
Okay, so that's kind of the progress on our current plan. We want to go into just the addendums for this year. The addendums, 3 of them are pretty straightforward as far as standard operating items. The 4th is a new goal that the Solid Waste Management Committee is proposing. The Solid Waste Management Committee is a recommendations board, and that any ultimate authority resides with the City Commission. So the wording on any of these recommendations, the approval, the modification is up to you guys. So we want to make sure and explain that. The Solid Waste Management Committee did make a recommendation for zero waste by 2050. And that was, we talked about whether or not that was even practical, but the essence of it is they wanted to make a strong commitment to the reduction of waste in Saline County in the future. And that was, even though it was understood that we know we can't get there, that by having a very strong goal, we could start taking the steps to be specific and have targeted measurement.
So, Commissioners, I may jump in there. I do have a practical / economic development concern in that regard. I respect the aggressiveness of the goal. I respect the stretch goal nature of it, and the fact that they acknowledge that it may not be practical. I'm not sure our current employers and businesses, or our prospective businesses and employers, will necessarily discount that goal as they make decisions about expansion and location in the community. And so I really think we need to give that serious consideration, whether that is something that, I don't know that we can say it and not mean it, and say it and try to walk away from it or walk back from it. And I think it sets us up for a disconnect with our business community.
Actually, I tell you what, I'll make sure that you have time at the end that you can speak to that, Phil, okay? We'll let him keep. I'm sorry, we'll make sure that you have time at the end to offer comments on the goal.
Well, this is one of the decision points, the addendum approval, and then we're going to kind of shift gears on you as far as the landfill consultant approval after this. So the first 2 addendums were just the comprehensive fees for the carts and then for the second carts. The 3rd addendum deals with the purchase of the SDRC, which we felt like it was a symbol or a commitment by the city to continue recycling here in the city by making that investment. And then this fourth goal or addendum is the one that we would like you to weigh in on, because this is the formal action that we need to bring to you next week is the approval of this addendum. It's on the commission meeting for your formal approval next week. So this is where we'd like your input.
Okay, so so if you'd like our input about that
Right
now, then I think it would be more appropriate to have Mr. Black speak to that.
Just procedurally,
So,
if we give our input on something that hasn't been presented, then we're basically composing the plan. I mean, I just,
The real question here is, because we're going to be seeking approval of the annual review of the plan, you don't have to make a decision today. We're going to present these addendums in a blue sheet form next week at the commission meeting. But if we are going to change or walk back from this particular goal and not make that part of the plan, Jim and I will just need to know that so that we can adjust the letter that we send to the KDHE environmental scientists at the Bureau of Waste Management, and we would pull that addendum from the list. Or we could if you decided to change that goal, then we would simply rewrite it. But, I mean, we have time to respond. This is more to have the conversation about it.
That would be the purpose of our open discussion next week, not
Exactly.
not
But
today.
it's
Yeah.
not at all uncommon in a study session to have this preliminary discussion so that you can deliberate, provide us some direction so that we can come prepared for your
So
ultimate
are we
action.
specifically talking about addendum 4? right
Correct,
now? Okay.
correct. The first three are just actions that the commission, based on staff recommendations, has taken, and that's generally what we do in annual reviews. We submit the documents, so we'll submit the resolutions, we'll submit the blue sheet to the KDHE, and then that becomes an appendix in the solid waste management plan. That's typically the way we do this. This is a new one because the committee's making a recommendation, a significant recommendation to add this particular goal to the solid waste management plan.
And the solid waste management plan is due when? Because in your-
December 4th.
Okay, so we do have plenty of time to take this under consideration and.
Yes, ma'am.
And next week, when we make our decision, it's not like it's due on November 16th. There's actually.
Yes, ma'am.
A period of time to construct the letter. Okay.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right. I'm sorry, Mr. Black, do you want to real quickly speak
Well,
to
real
that?
quickly, since they brought it up, first of all, the research generally shows when you talk about zero, you're talking about 0 to 8%. Anything below 8% is considered part of it. When you think about what we went through the school board for the bond issue and what the city went through for the downtown development and renewal, it involved a considerable number of stakeholders. To take on something like this would require that kind of stakeholder involvement. It would not, and in fact, one of the reasons I went back to school at K-State was because its affiliation, that program's affiliation with the Kansas Leadership Center, and it gave me access to resources, one of which clearly states that you need to have, first of all, a clear, identifiable goal that everybody on the committee, stakeholder committee agrees to, that it's measurable, that the people there are there under the kind of, based on what their expertise is. So I know she was talking about restaurants, for example, where you have significant amount of food waste. Those kinds of people need to be involved. It needs to be continuously communicated, and finally, you need to have an organization that can function as a backbone to this deal. And it would not, in my opinion, in this case, be the city. It would be a business. And that would address the issue of our businesses feeling like they're being regulated out of business. And so my suggestion would be to find a major organization like Vortex or Great Plains or Schwann's or somebody who has the capability of devoting a few staff or one staff member to help administrate this kind of a program that would be a long-term solution. And I don't have them with me because we have short time, but there are a number of case studies where this has worked very, very well. But it's very similar to what we did in these other two instances, where you have to involve the community. This cannot be a government deal.
Right.
It's just not going to work, especially after the recent vote.
Okay.
So that's what I have in mind. I haven't been able to bring all this to the committee, but we will be talking about it. And it's silly for us to think that somehow we're going to get down. I took me 6 months to get one tall bag filled, and I see the neighbors downstairs fill it, the entire 90-gallon deal every week. It's not the landfill problem. It's a customer problem, and getting them to slow down on the generation of waste. And it's restaurants, and it's all the industrial waste we've talked about. It's an enormous and enormously complicated problem that will take everybody's involvement. So I'm not naive. This is not a pie-in-the-sky deal, but we felt like that kind of a goal gives us something under which everything falls, whether it's single-use plastic bags or automated pickup or any of those things.
All right. Hey, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I'm going to apologize in advance for possibly confusing it. I generally agree with what Mr. Black said in terms of process, and I think as we go into the rest of the PowerPoint, you're going to see, we're not going to run a process between now and December 4th, but I think you're going to see some process, data gathering, and opportunity of how we might be able to play out that conversation over the coming year. I just don't know that we're
I think wording,
Without that
I think
conversation, what we
wording has a
set
lot
goal.
to do with it, and communication, and I don't know if there's a way we could communicate it differently than making it sound like zero waste by 2050, and I'm not sure what that verbiage looks like, but yeah, I'd have a little concern about throwing out there that we're trying to do zero waste by 2050. I think we could scare some people. I think we should have a goal to reduce waste, but mainly when we know it may not be realistic, I just think we need to kind of try to.
I commend Phil and I commend the
Yeah.
committee for the idea of, leaning forward in the saddle and looking at this problem as deeply and as holistically as we can. I will tell you, I share the concerns to a great degree that Mike had mentioned earlier about the impact that this could have on community, industry, and commercial enterprise in Salina. I am fairly confident that if I were to share this with the environmental scientists at the KDHE, they would probably also feel that way. I think I expressed to you previously that the solid waste industry in general, and Kansas certainly is among them, that solid waste across the country is regionalizing, and more communities are looking for regional solutions to solid waste. And Salina is at the heart of a fairly robust regional industrial and commercial and retail center. And I just have a feeling that messaging to them is one that's going to, it would certainly make them take pause in their considerations. The other thing I would share is I have discussed this because I just took the goal to say, okay, how would we go about tackling this? And so I've already been speaking to several different companies, solid waste companies, about this. Both are subject matter experts, and both had very strong language about why we ought to be looking at shorter term, more realistic goals that we can achieve in time. And they worded it that way because remember that the solid waste management plan is a 10-year planning cycle. So we ought to be setting goals that can be accomplished within that 10-year period. And if we think about it in those terms, and I believe in the discussions that we've had previously, I believe that Mr. Black would agree that we're going to have to tackle this one item at a time anyway. So what we ought to be doing is thinking about a goal that would represent what we could expect to accomplish in the next 10-year planning period starting in 2022.
I believe a lot of it's education. We've talked about that before. Are we seeing hey, Carl?
Hey,
Yes, sir.
I think is that your dog we hear?
That's not my dog, but
Oh.
I guess I could close the window. That's bothering me.
come on, Carl, we want
And
to
if
hear
I
you
could get
yell
a
at the
word in
neighbor's dog.
edgewise when you have a break.
Are we seeing our tonnage in the landfill go down as the tonnage in, at the recycling center goes up? Have we seen any correlation?
I'm going
Not
to
really.
say no, because I think that the tonnage that we're seeing going up in the recycling center is being offset by the expansion of business and by, although I don't understand the census numbers and don't pretend to, I think that we're seeing more customers coming to Salina. We certainly have out-of-county waste that contributes to that. And so I think additional waste that we are seeing, and also because of what I said about the regionalization that's happening within solid waste. So whatever's being recycled is also being offset by new sources of waste.
And I can't imagine COVID wasn't a detriment to the landfill. I mean, with the amount of carry out and stuff that went on, and with the amount of Amazon that we see being delivered and stuff.
I think it's fairly safe to say that as you see growth in Salina, you could make a correlation to the growth in the waste that we see at the landfill. It's slow but steady, in, I think, in Salina, in Saline County, but it is a growth, not a decline.
Okay, you know, I'm hearing a confusing association of solid waste with zero waste. Solid waste is what you have left over when all your other efforts have failed.
Correct.
All right. Zero waste doesn't mean, that we're still not producing things, but it's what we do with them. First you have to reduce what you don't need. You reuse what you can. Recycling is at the tail end. Throwing away is really at the tail end.
Correct.
But is it Honda or Toyota brags that they build a car with and don't produce any trash? One of them. Toyota, thank you. I mean, if they can build a car with zero waste, surely we can handle excess food products from Schwann's. I mean, the order of magnitude of difficulty, is not even comparable. But if we have 3 10-year plans that aren't aligned head to tail, at the end of 30 years, you may be 5 feet from where you were when you started. If you have a long-range goal, 30 years is a long time, but you divide it into 15 steps or 6 5-year steps, you can actually start achieving what you want at the end of those 30 years. But no one expects us to do it in 5 years, and wish Norman Mantle was here to back me up, but we're creating too much trash, and we got to do something with it. And a lot of stuff that we throw away it doesn't need to be created in the first place, but we don't need to be throwing it away. But this is a very non-threatening statement. It's a goal of producing zero waste by 2050. If we get down to 20% waste by 2050, that's going to be a major accomplishment. We got rid of 80% of our waste. I don't think it's unreasonable to shoot for it all. I don't think that we should think that necessarily the brain power behind it's going to be sitting up here in this dais, and we're going to need, as Mr. Black stated, Dr. Black, you got to get the right stakeholders involved, and this would be specialty planning, but I'd like to think of this as what happens when you have a goal and you just take, the first step is the most important because it sets your direction. And if it takes us 15 steps to do it, fine. We're not, well, you young guys might, but most of us probably won't be here for that meeting in 30 years to see how close we got. But, well, you will, okay. So you'll be 90. That's true, I'll only be 98. Maybe I will be here. But, it's a realistic goal, and you talk about setting your community apart in the world. These are the things that set aside. I think you'll attract smaller entrepreneurial businesses to a place that has that mindset rather than, nothing here should drive business away. If this scares a business, we really need to see what they're putting in our environment anyway, because it's probably not non-toxic.
How do we, I'm sorry.
Mayor, may I?
I'm done.
Yeah, yes, please go ahead, Carl.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis, I don't agree with you. Those things can have big import when they're a larger policy. I appreciate the Jim comments about this being something that ought to be taken in steps, and that it can send an adverse message as a bigger policy thing to the development community, everybody out there looking at us, and we are fortunate to have people looking in at us. We want to have all the horses moving in the same direction, and a policy like this, when you get to different knockout criteria, it might just knock us out. We've got housing development on hold that's sitting next to Menards because they have a national policy about where stores should be placed. I can't see overreaching on this when it's not practical.
Well, we're not going to start with Schwann's. We would, I hope, start with our next door neighbors. What can we do at the individual local level? That's how you start setting consumer trends and buying practices. I mean, you start small and you build up.
The remainder of this study session is going to go into a little bit of detail about next steps, taking the results from our waste characterization study, expanding input from the city commission as well as the public on what the future goals and vision for the community is. But how we get there, you know, we're breaking it up, the big apple, into smaller bites with our next 10-year plan. But the policy statement is where you folks need to weigh in.
Yeah, I was going
Very,
to say.
very briefly, can you tell me, I mean, we had this, not this discussion, but we had similar discussions about landfill life and this kind of thing 10 years ago. And can you refresh my memory on who our out-of-county customers are that bring us?
Could you give me a hand here, Larry? Come up here. Speak into the mic.
Dickinson County, Ottawa
Come on,
County,
come here, come here.
We got to make this official here. Can you get in front of the mic?
Clay County, Ellsworth County, occasionally Ellis County. We will be picking up Mitchell County soon. Instead of bypassing us, going to Topeka, it's shorter drive from here.
Okay, Mitchell, Dickinson, Clay, Ellsworth, Cloud.
Occasionally Ellis, occasionally McPherson,
And Lincoln, I think.
Lincoln,
So, I mean,
Osborne.
so there's a couple things here. I mean, if you're looking at, I mean, part of this is what is the purpose of reducing the waste? Obviously, there's the benefit of doing good for the earth by reducing waste. Then there's also, how do we extend the life of our landfill? Well, we can reduce the waste real quick, but there's always that rub. We also make money, and how do we balance that? That's a tremendous amount of waste coming into our landfill. So we're focused on a goal that isn't necessarily going to be the goal of every other county and community that is contributing to our landfill. So this is, I guess it extends and has more tentacles than just our community.
I guess if I could add here, staff will support whatever decision that the commission makes, and we will put 100% of effort behind whatever that decision is. We are committed to reducing waste where we believe that we can reduce waste at, and it's what's smart for the community and helps the environment and, you know, protects businesses in Saline County.
I do think the rest of the PowerPoint presentation might help shed
Yes.
some light on.
There's a couple of slides that I really want to get to because I think it'll help answer some of the questions that you have if we still have time.
All right, thank you.
You want to go forward? Okay. So remembering that your input on addendum number 4, which we will bring back next week for formal action, any guidance you can give us today is appreciated. The waste characterization study that starts Monday, we will be going through our current waste stream, and I've got another slide that gives a lot more detail on the number of samples, but we will get a comprehensive final report when this gets done. We did get the grant from KDHE because they want to model behavior by Saline County and Salina on a statewide basis as far as collecting data and then making decisions, planning decision based on the data. We will keep you posted after the characterization study. We don't expect results until early next year with the actual study. Next slide. Currently, we go in 3-year chunks on our engineering contract. SCS is our current contractor. And we went through the full RFP and interviewed folks for that and selected them. They had been our previous landfill consultant. We did write in that blue sheet and in that contract that it could be renewed and extended by 3 years because, as you can see, we're talking 10, 20, 30-year programs in a landfill, and it makes it extremely difficult if we have to almost train a new consultant every 3 years and go through the full RFP process. That we're going to bring you some information next week about renewing their current contract and then also adding a task to that contract to take the data from the waste characterization study and help us develop those strategies by holding public meetings, getting input from the commission as well as the solid waste committee. So
Commissioner Davis, if I may, much like my comments to Commissioner Peck at the beginning of this, that we take not only your comments, but the data that we collect very, very, very seriously. I can't overstate enough the reason that we got the grant is the Bureau Director called me personally. The reason that we got the grant is because, in her words, you're looking at the problem correctly, and I need to teach this process to every other municipal solid waste landfill in the state of Kansas. You had told us many times over that you wanted us to be leaders in this industry, and with a few more slides and a little bit of patience, I think I can show you that whether you keep the goal or not is actually not a concern. I mean, in the end, we're gonna do whatever you want us to do. But I think there's a way that we can achieve significant waste reduction by being very intentional about targeting specific wastes that we select, and then setting out policies or education and enforcement to implement those changes. And all I can tell you is, and I feel very confident to say that the Bureau of Waste Management Director would echo these words, that the strategy that we are trying to put forth is, it really is a game changer, because for the first time, we're looking at solid waste purely from what are the most significant wastes that we have, what are the most concerning wastes we have, much like a risk assessment where you have what's the severity of the accident and what's the probability of it occurring. It's kind of the same way with waste. If we say, these are the most prevalent wastes that we have, and of these wastes, these are the most targetable items that we have, we can develop a strategy that not just benefits Salina, but I honestly believe it benefits the entire state of Kansas for the 18 municipal solid waste landfills that we have. I haven't spoken to her about this yet, but I think that if we were to allow us to take the waste characterization study and develop a waste reduction strategy using landfill engineering specialists, that we would be setting a precedent that the state would be able to implement across all of the landfills in the state of Kansas. I think it has that much of an impact. I don't disagree with the goal. I think Commissioner Hoppig said it best, is maybe it's how we word the goal, and what message what that specific message sends to others. But anyway.
Right.
Jim.
Well, SCS is our current contractor. 3 years is kind of the normal size contract. 2 years from now, we'll be starting cell design. 3 years from now, we'll be starting cell construction. Next year is the low year as far as the amount of work that they would do for us. And we'd like to add a task to analyze our waste characterization study data and do some public involvement to develop these waste reduction strategies and that vision statement for the community that Dr. Davis was referring to a minute ago, as far as specific, measurable, actionable items to reduced waste, and have a schedule for that reduction developed, meaningful inputs. So this is the normal planning process where we take our existing waste management plan. We're going to do the waste characterization study. We want to develop a waste reduction strategy with the vision and goals for the community. Develop those 5-year actionable items, but then also write our 10-year plan. So we'd like to have it completed by next August so that we can incorporate it into next year's 10-year plan, the 2022 plan.
And while we've done this in the past plan, our plan is very well regarded in the state, but we have never formalized the process, and that's what the KDHE is interested in. This slide represents the beginnings of formalizing the process. This is how you identify waste to target based on data from your community, and then develop specific actionable targets to reach to eliminate that waste. You guys know, I've mentioned it for the past several years, that the recycling markets are very bad right now. They're very volatile. What I don't want to ever get us into a position where we implement a policy change, or we implement a new program, and then we have to be like many communities in Kansas and across the country that had to shut down or shutter their facilities because they didn't develop a sustainable way to achieve whatever that next reduction goal is. And I think having that kind of process is really, really important to ultimately getting to what you want, and what the Solid Waste Management Committee wants, is reducing the amount of waste in our landfill. But I think we have to do that in actionable items, items that we've targeted intentionally to reduce, and then working toward implementing that.
And if I
You know,
could,
go ahead.
if I could just follow up on one thing, Dr. Black mentioned it, Mike mentioned it, Carl mentioned it. I'd love to see some integration of different stakeholder groups, whether that looks like other counties, whether that looks like our major industrial waste producers. But that's not necessarily something that I'm seeing listed out. And my follow-up question to that is, how long are we going to have the E3 coordinator position? Because if this is a long-term position, I mean, I think that would be very valuable to have her leading the effort to bring people to the table, so this doesn't seem like, whether or not we adopt the zero waste goal, I just think incorporating those pieces, if we want to make any kind of meaningful reduction in, or lengthen our landfill life, then we need to have all the players at the table.
Madam Mayor, two things in response. One, the landfill engineering consultant agrees with you, and if we were to add the task to the next contract for them to implement a waste reduction strategy, the lead engineer was vehement in saying and it's even in one of Jim's slides, that we have to have, it needs to be based on stakeholder input. And we agree with that, not only from interest groups, but from businesses, from industry, from the real estate side, from other city governments, all of that. So if we were to develop waste reduction strategies, our intent would be to do it with a lot of stakeholder input.
Thank you.
And I think that, I hope that is what you had in mind. And it is something that's, I don't know if it's in this presentation or in 2 weeks, but I do know that we're going to talk more about stakeholder involvement.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, again, when you're looking at something 30, 40, 50 years down the road, the effort is not just on reducing landfill waste, but it's also about preserving natural resources, reducing unnecessary spending, and just generally creating that healthy lifestyle. The biggest threat to this country's economic survival is going to be the fact we're going to be a very unhealthy population at the rate we're going. And you have to get into people's minds, and you have to change behavior, lifestyle, attitudes. And you don't do that overnight. You can't legislate it. But, this is just one of those areas where we can start. And again, we're not talking about fixing this in 5 years.
So
This is something we get started, we hand on to the next generation, they hand on to the next generation.
I guess
hang on a second. I just want to reassure you, staff's role is to try to implement ultimately what it is that you tell us you'd like to implement. So really the deliberation needs to occur at the dais. We're here to help, but I don't know, I want to kind of disengaged from a back and forth from staff's perspective, other than we're trying to tell you what our proposed approach is so that you can make an informed policy
Well,
decision. And
that was the reason I didn't think we should have a role in influencing the recommendations from the Solid Waste Management Committee. This would be like one of you preparing a blue sheet, bringing it to us the week beforehand, and telling us, well, cut out the options you don't want. I mean, that's not the way we do it. You bring it to us, then we discuss the options that appear relevant. If this is this committee's goal, then, you know, they should bring it to us.
Right.
You-
If that's the committee's work product, yeah, bring it to us and we'll have the policy discussion next week and take it from there, especially since we have the benefit of having until early December to
But-
submit it.
And I guess I'll take responsibility for that. Last time we brought the plan forward, we bogged down the day that the decision needed to be made, and we painted you into a corner, not leaving you enough time. And my takeaway was you wanted more lead time to deliberate. And so we very intentionally tried to set this process up to give you that lead time.
All right.
I like the lead time on
Yeah.
an issue like this.
And we've still got, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Yep, no, I can.
But I
accept-
see, I'm sure you can feel it. We're halfway through your presentation.
No, I can accelerate some of this. A lot of it is the detail about renewing the contract with SCS. SCS is respected in the state. They've worked for many municipalities in the state. In the notes pages, there's actually a link for the work that they did for the city of Olathe, which was actually a major expansion and review of how they process waste in Johnson County. And if you want to get into the details, there's a lot of details there, but that's kind of cutting edge technology on handling waste in a metropolitan area. So they recently did a wage study for the city of Hutch, you know, a community that's about the same size as Salina. So they're very familiar with the waste and the policies and politics here in Kansas. They have national experts. They're actually combining with EEIS, or EESI, a lady that actually used to run a waste authority. So she's a nationwide expert that will help us. But now it's scalable. We're proposing $50,000 to $100,000, but, you know, we can go as far as you direct us as far as evaluating options and opportunities, but we'd like to put it in their contract to do at least a $50,000 to $100,000 a year study for next year. And that's kind of like kind of putting your money where your mouth is. If you really believe we need to develop these strategies, we ought to be willing to pay for it. So that's, use the data that we're collecting in a meaningful way. So that's our plan, or that's what our hopes are. That's what we intend to do. Their contract expires February 20th. We would actually renew it, bring it to you for renewal in December, so that we can, otherwise we'll have to go through the RFP process, advertise, and then we probably won't even have somebody on board by the time their contract expires. So whether you feel like renewal, which was allowed in the last blue sheet, is acceptable, we would move forward vetting the details. The details for their proposed plan, here is a summary of the work that they normally do, is about $70,000 a year just to do the permitting and measuring and engineering that we do to keep Larry's landfill open. We've got a $100,000 placeholder, $50,000 to $100,000 to do this waste reduction study for next year. As soon as we get the results from the waste characterization study, we would move into the waste reduction strategies effort, which includes public involvement with the community and stakeholders. The following year, their contract, we do the engineering for the new cell design. We have to design a cell about every 5 years. A new cell design right now is about $100,000. That's about half what it would normally be, because we do have a master plan which has the cell layout and the landfill 50% design. So it's $100,000 for design, and then the following year we would have construction of $2.5 to $3.5 million, depending on what else is done, and construction costs of $250,000 to administer that contract, perform all the testing, and make the acceptance of that work and that contract in compliance with KDHE. They have to certify that it was all done correctly. So those are the next 3 years. It's about $70,000 annually. We have $100,000 for design and about $250,000 the following year for inspection and contract administration to stay in compliance with KDHE.
Another difference that Salina uses is that we're one of a few that do this, but our design costs would typically be 10% of construction costs, and our number's significantly lower in that. And that's because Salina has a landfill master plan approved by the state, which already brings us to 50% design for the landfill.
Okay, this waste reduction strategies, this is the slide in your talking points, your notes pages, that talks about solid waste will be broken up into 7 different categories, but 41 different subcategories as far as the types of waste we're accepting in our landfill. Our recycling is going to be broken up into 5 categories, like plastic, paper, metals, non-combustibles, but then 30 subcategories. So it'll break that plastics into type 1, type 2, type 3, different types of plastics. So we're going to get a lot of data from that study. We did a study in 2004 and 1997. We're going to compare these results to those just to see how the trend has changed. We're going to do a full analysis of the development and then hopefully develop strategies for waste reductions. There are potential grant opportunities once we get our data to go further with not only this waste reduction study, but then implementation of any of these may be eligible for future solid waste grants. So the waste reduction strategy, next slide, Jacob. We're armed with our data. We want to next spring go out do some public involvement with the community and stakeholders and the city commission and our solid waste committee and develop the vision and goals for the next plan and take those plans and strategies and incorporate them into our actual solid waste plan, which is the blueprint for the next 10 years. Next slide. This waste reduction strategy, we've talked about it a lot, but developing the goals and vision is probably the most important part of it, which is step 1. Next slide. Developing the strategies and evaluating those strategies, costing out those strategies, seeing what's feasible for Salina. You know, this is not Santa Barbara, California or something. It's what is feasible for the city of Salina and Saline County. What's doable for our residents, what's practical for our businesses, develop some costs and strengths of each strategy, and then develop an actual implementation plan. Develop the 5-year action plan or part of our 10-year plan with those strategies. The solid waste, the internal folks, we sat down last week, started the preliminary review of our current plan, measuring the current 8 goals that we have, and thought this was just a brainstorming session that Jim walked us through using a principle .MLPF, Doctrine, Organization, Training, Materials, Leadership, Personnel, and Facilities. What are our issues that we have now, and what do we need to address in the first 10 years? This is just a rough draft. It's just for talking points, but you can see some of those are current and some of them are new. But this is, we will be visiting with our solid waste committee at the December meeting about the development of this. This is actually chapter 6 in our current solid waste management plan, the developing of issues, discussions, and strategies.
And this is the slide from earlier where the current plan has 8 goals. What we did in the initial functional needs analysis was identify 12 areas for the next 10-year planning period using that method that Jim spoke about.
And we're going to get into more detail on some of these next week. As far as the 25-year capital plan for the landfill, you need to understand all the big ticket items that are coming up. And just for instance, we priced scrapers for the landfill 3 years ago at $900,000. To buy one today is $1.8 million. It's doubled in 3 years. So we have 2 of them, and they're going to need replaced in the next 25 years. So we've got compactors that are approaching $1 million a piece, bulldozers over $1 million. So just in equipment, we've got a $10 to $15 million capital budget. And they last about 20 years, and to make them last 20 years, you got to rebuild them halfway through. And I thought this was interesting. Larry came up with, there's a before failure rebuild, which is like a halfway between the rebuild. You've got to spend another $250,000 just to get by. So it's just crazy what it costs to do this business. So next slide. This is our current consultant, SCS. This is their co-consultant that would help them with the waste characterization analysis. Like I said, we presented kind of their budget for the next 3 years. It's more than what the current plan is. Natural inflation, engineering costs, construction costs, all of that is going up, and it's being reflected in our prices. These are the other studies that they've done, and I would suggest if you are interested in the notes pages, the Olathe, Kansas study was one that I thought was the most useful because they looked at everything. I did look online at the city of Hutch's financial analysis that they did last March for them, and they are actually raising their fees 6.5% next year. They make it a part of their property taxes, though, instead of collecting tipping fees. But Hutch is raising their landfill fees or their solid waste fees 6.5%, plus a $320,000 increase on their construction and demolition waste. So it's 6.5% plus.
Hutch is all tipping fees?
It is property tax.
Oh, Hutch is property, okay.
Hutch is property tax. And Olathe is not, they don't operate a landfill. It's all just a transfer station to the other landfills in the metropolitan area.
Hutch uses property tax and tipping fees.
Okay, gotcha.
So the summary slide, this is kind of where annual approval of the solid waste management plan is what we're going to bring back to you next week. As you direct, it may just be as it's prepared and presented today for further deliberation, but we did want to give you some time to think about it, maybe collect some input from the community. The zero waste by 2050 is a strong statement. So we just need to understand what that means. The waste characterization results are going to be crucial to our planning for the next period. We'd like to renew our current contract with SCS so that we can keep things going next year. And then the next study session, we'd hope to do it next week, but actually it's the 22nd. We're getting into the 25-year capital plan for the landfill. It establishes the landfill rates. An increase in landfill rates does impact our sanitation department and the rates that we calculate for the sanitation department. Sanitation department, we'd also like to visit with you about a building and a tree trimming effort that's needed to collect sanitation here in Salina safely. So we're going to combine all that in the next study session. So we'll have disposal rates at the landfill and disposal rates as the sanitation fees, because we'd like to get those incorporated in Ms. Pack's addendum to the comprehensive fees that she's going to prepare late this month, early next month. So just a heads up on explaining all of how we came up with basically a 5% increase in solid waste and a 4.4% increase for sanitation next year. So that's the next slide. It's just kind of what we're going to talk about next time. But we will stand for questions, or if you need to dismiss us now, we're more than prepared.
Any questions?
Mayor,
Yes.
could I ask them to throw out a number for a storage building?
We are looking at about $350,000. It's just a Morton building that's heated. It does have a wash bay in it, and it does have a service pit.
We're also intending to recommend that we simply use existing solid waste management funds to pay for that building.
Thank you.
Is this building would just go next to the existing buildings or replace or?
Yes, if you're familiar with the general services yard where Mr. Reinert's building is, right behind the central garage, there is a Quonset hut, an old World War II styled semi-dome looking building, and then there are salt spreaders on the other side of that to the east. Our intent would be to remove the salt spreaders, demolish the old Quonset hut, and put the new building on the existing concrete within our yard. And as you'll see next week, it'll bring quite a few extra side benefits. One, it improves snow removal response times because we'll have all our salt spreaders located together. So consolidating our resources. And two, it'll provide additional parking that is very needed for that facility for employees and the public.
And it protects our investment. These, if you remember, these trucks cost about $250,000 apiece. They have a 7-year life cycle that if we can reduce the maintenance on them or extend their life, the building will pay for itself. If it extends the life of the trucks 1 year, it's paid for itself.
And I do want to say, if I gave any impression that I was resisting either the fourth addendum or any comments that you made, I apologize to you and I apologize to Mike. I want to reiterate that we're happy to do whatever it is that you suggest. These are merely the best data that we can provide you regarding this topic. But we're fully prepared to implement whatever it is that you would recommend.
Trent, did you have a question? No. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. We will see you next week then, and then in 2 weeks. 2 weeks for
2
the
weeks.
study session,
Well,
but
yeah.
next week for the
Yes.
plan.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you very much.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate your time.
All right. There's a lot of papers going back and forth here on my end. I guess we have a few minutes until our next meeting, which will be the Salina Fieldhouse lender. And the group that is on that board is Todd Davidson, Mike Hoppick, myself, Samantha Angel, and Mark Ritter. I believe, is that the composition of the board?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And I regret, I don't know who is,
Todd
Jerry?
Davidson is president?
yeah, I
think
see,
I saw him enter the
two.
room.
I see two here.
We were expecting all three of them.
Okay. I'll give it a
So,
few minutes.
I-
You
Oh,
take
somebody
this
can
one or
come,
this
somebody
one.
can come up top.
Right.
Sit over here,
Yeah.
too.
Is it on camera?
Todd wants to take
What?
that one since
Is
you're-
it on camera?
I don't know that it is or not.
And
I
then you
don't know
can
if
have
it
this
is or
one
not.
over here.
If so, they can just come
Oh.
on up here and sit.
So, yeah, I guess
How you doing?
Dr. Davis and Mr. Peck would be excused if they so desires. Oh, thank you. Hey, did you get my message? You got my message about the extra proclamations?
Oh, yeah,
bless your
I'm
heart.
sorry,
Thank you so much.
Still.
What's that? Hey, doing, Mike?
Good, how are you?
That's where Dr. Davis was. Fine.
I can't keep up. Are you coming or going?
I do.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't, I have one written on.
How are you? Good, how are you? Good, thank you.
All right, how's Mark doing?
We went, yeah, we got another one coming up.
Hi, how are you?
Week and a half.
Good, thank you.
Down to Florida for a couple days.
I haven't seen you in a while.
Because I
Around between here and Lawrence? Huh?
Yeah.
That's what
Try to
retirement.
squeeze one more vacation in here with the family before, lose one to college, so.
Has it, John Quinley retired. He said he hadn't had any
He's
problem at
busy.
all.
Enjoys making money. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you had a routine. You had a routine.
He got
for so
kicked
long.
off.
Why don't you come sit up here if you want?
Our goal here is to beat last year's time, 2:47, and we adjourned at 2:50. So
That's right.
we can get under 3 minutes.
Carl's president, right?
No,
No, is it you?
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Gavel.
I was gonna say, here, let's get it going.
Do we have everybody?
we do.
So-
4 or 5?
Yep.
All right. So are we ready to go forward?
Believe we are.
And we'll talk to Sheet.
Oh, my God, you're the
Yeah, I figured they'd provide it. All right, we'll call this meeting to order for the Salina Fieldhouse Lender, Inc. Leverage Lender We have confirmation that the Kansas Open Meeting Act has been satisfied.
Yes.
Okay. First item up is the approval of last year's minutes from October 5, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes from October 5, 2020. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. First item of new business is election of officers. We have a motion for who to elect or whether we'll retain the same slate.
I will interject that currently we have Melissa as one of the officers, and she will not be present next year, so we'll need to elect a new officer in her position. Actually, we have
No.
Todd Davidson president, Samantha as vice president, Mark as secretary, and Mike Hoppick as treasurer, so that is not the case.
Correct.
But we'll add one of the
We
new
will,
commissioners
city
coming on?
commissioner will add a new commission after we get those new commissioners
Okay.
on board.
Okay, sounds good.
So we could keep the same slate, sorry.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion to keep the same slate, and it's been seconded. Any discussion? Are you okay with that? It's a pretty heavy responsibility. But I think I'm up to the task so far anyway.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Any other business that we need to discuss this year?
I don't think so.
Okay. Then do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Close.
George?
Yeah.
We'll try to make it a little longer next year.
Oh, you're going to add some agenda items for me?
Maybe.
All right. Something to look forward to.
That's right. Got a few years for that.
How many years we got?
2014 will be 7, or 2024 will be 7 years. It's coming up quickly.
All right. Are we ready to move into the QALICB?
I believe we are, and just as a clarification, this group is constituted by the city commission that was seated at the time, and so with Commissioner Franz's recusing himself from the city commission, we have not replaced him, so essentially you have 4 out of 5 members. We didn't go to the effort, it didn't anticipate the need to appoint Commissioner Peck to this seat.
Did we lose
I do
Commissioner
think we
Davis?
need Commissioner
We need to
Davis.
find Commissioner Davis.
Thought I had read the list of participants.
Well,
It's
we're on
understandably
a new-
confusing.
A new board.
All right.
And Commissioner Hoppick is the president of this board.
Right.
Have trouble keeping this stuff
I do
So I
too.
got it all right.
straight.
I could try to explain it all, but that would
Yeah,
drag out
that's-
this whole conversation. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I will call the meeting to order. I would ask if the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been provided.
Yes.
Okay. Do we need to do a roll call
Commissioner Hoppick,
here?
Commissioner Ryan,
Here?
Mayor Hodges,
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Okay, and it looks like the first thing we have is to approve the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of the prior meeting.
Second.
Got a motion second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, and again, I guess we need to look at new election of officers.
It looks like I'm going to be the only one that needs to be replaced, so
Correct.
I don't know if there's any interest in just keeping the same group of officers, but
Yes.
can we go ahead and just put on like Bill Longbine as the top vote getter and the vice president, or do we leave it vacant?
Mr.
But I think
Bankston?
one possibility you have is to keep the same membership, whether you want to keep the same slate or keep the four of you for now, and then at the point that you go off the commission, then create a vacancy, we could fill the vacancy, and we could appoint someone to replace your office as well.
Gotcha.
That's probably a little
Easier
bit
one?
more straightforward than
Straightforward, yeah.
appointing someone that's not a commissioner just yet.
I'd like to enter that as a motion, if that's permissible with the city attorney.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second to retain the same slate of officers. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that passes 4-0. Okay, any unfinished or other business?
No.
Nope.
Almost as quick as Todd Davidson, aren't I? So
Almost.
I would accept,
I'm sorry, just,
okay.
we already got, are we required to file any annual reports just to
We are.
tell the community what we've done with, that, you know, that allowed us to get the
We file an annual report
income.
with the state of Kansas, which in turn files it in their website. We don't put any of that to the local public, but we do file an annual report with the state of Kansas reporting tourism and participation and things like that. We are required to submit that to the state.
And then we also have to conduct a project-specific audit
Yes.
related to this project as well.
So if any members of the public wanted to have access to that information, it's on what website? Was it the Kansas Attorney General's, did you say, or
Kansas Department of Commerce.
Department of Commerce?
And then we would certainly have a copy of the audit in the city clerk's office if anyone was interested in that copy. I will mention from the last discussion, though, the QALICB kind of has a 7-year life cycle, and that will end in 2024. So we'll be doing some closing of the project at that point in 2024.
Okay, anything else?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We are adjourned.
And we don't have the Lower Smoky Hill Water Supply Access District until 3:45, so we'll have a few minutes of break here. Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna. I don't know how. Want to call to order the meeting of the Lower Smoky Hill Water Supply Access District. Period. That's a long introduction. Can we have roll call, please? Here? I don't think your
I don't think you're up.
microphone is on. Yeah. There we go.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Tom Toll,
Here.
Carl Esping,
Here.
Commissioner Ryan,
Here?
Mayor Hodges,
Here.
Commissioner Hoppeck,
Here.
Commissioner Peck.
Here.
All right, I've asked for approval of the August 2nd, 2021 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion, corrections? All in favor of approval, say aye.
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 That seems unanimous. Any new business?
From staff's perspective, there is not.
All right. Any unfinished or other business other than what's listed as 4.1? All right, we
none.
need to discuss our next meeting date. 3 possible dates were submitted. January 10th. Is that that's a Monday? These are all Mondays, yeah. January 10th, 24th, or February 7th.
Is January 10th the day that we're swearing in the new commissioners, including, I see,
It-
Commissioner-elect
Yeah.
Longbine?
Correct. Yeah, if you wanted to wait till after that, then we'd have the new commission in place.
I think it probably
think-
depends on your availability, too.
You guys aren't doing anything in January.
Well, I might be in Bahamas, I don't know, but
Well, how about the 24th is, the 7th may find some people in a post-Super Bowl stupor and not able to make it to the meeting, so. January 24th, make it?
and then the new commission,
Yes.
Yes,
Correct.
yeah, then
all right.
we can indoctrinate them.
I do hate to miss one more waterboarding meeting, but, you know.
We call it orientation.
Waterboarding, that doesn't sound very good. We shouldn't say waterboarding. I'm just saying right now, that's probably not appropriate term.
Melissa, we will miss you.
Oh,
And it may be worthwhile if
I'll
we can
miss
get a 5-minute overview of the district for that,
Yep.
what, 2 new commissioners.
Do you think you can do it in 5?
Well, if we keep it at 5, then we'll leave all the confusing stuff out.
Right.
Right. So I can have a motion.
Motion for January 24th, 2022 is our next meeting.
second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded to have our next meeting on January 24th, 2022. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? All right. Any reason to not adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Consider us adjourned.
Second.
Thank you. And now we have 11 minutes before the 4 o'clock meeting.
Coordinate today. That looks so nice sitting over there.
All right, and we're good to go. Welcome to the Monday, November 8th, 2021 Salina City Commission meeting. Before we get started, I'd like to request confirmation that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been provided.
Yes.
Thank you very much. With that, we will proceed with roll call.
Mayor Hodges?
Here.
Commissioner Davis?
Here.
Commissioner Hoppick?
Here.
Commissioner Peck?
Here?
Commissioner Ryan?
Here.
And with that, we are going to proceed to the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. But I'd like to, before we do that, I'd like to thank the VFW Post 1432 Honor Guard, consisting of Dave Eberhardt, Bob Wickwire, and Gary Kyle, who are going to post the colors and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So if all who are able would please rise. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, and with liberty and justice for all.
And now we'll have our moment of silence. Thank you. And thanks again to the VFW Post 1432 Honor Guard for presenting the colors today and help us getting off to a good start for the week to celebrate Veterans Day on Thursday. And with that, we will proceed with awards and proclamations.
3.1, recognition of November 1st, 2021 as Extra Mile Day in the city of Salina. Brenda Gutierrez will read the proclamation.
Good afternoon. Brenda Gutierrez with the Salina Area United Way. Thank you, Mayor, Commissioner, staff, and everyone in our community for participating in everything that you do when you think about civic engagement. Definitely this thank you goes out for you as well. The Extra Mile Day. Whereas Salina, Kansas is a community which acknowledges that a special vibrancy exists within the entire community when its individual citizens collectively go the extra mile in personal effort, volunteerism, and service. And whereas Salina, Kansas is a community which encourages its citizens to maximize their personal contribution to the community by giving of themselves wholeheartedly and with total effort, commitment, conviction to their individual ambitions, family, friends, community, And whereas Salina, Kansas is a community which chooses to shine a light on and celebrate individuals and organizations within its community who go the extra mile in order to make a difference and lift up fellow members in their community. And whereas Salina, Kansas acknowledges the mission of the Extra Mile to create 550 Extra Mile cities in America and is proud to support Extra Mile Day, which was November 1st, 2021. Now therefore, I, Mayor of Salina, Kansas, do hereby proclaim November 1st, 2021 to be Extra Mile Day. I urge each individual in the community to take time on this day not only to go the extra mile for his or her own life, but also to acknowledge all those who are inspirational in their efforts and their commitment to make their organizations, family, community, country, or world a better place. Melissa Roach-Heises, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gutierrez. I know that we've missed Extra Mile Day, but that's no excuse for people being able to go out into the community and make a difference. Every day can be Extra Mile Day. Is there anything in particular that that you're promoting or that we should know about for the rest of the month of November or even the rest of the year?
To acknowledge one big thing this year is the financial stability, because one of our goals, we fight for the health, education, and financial stability of all people. And due to the pandemic that was in 2020, we're really lifting up and celebrating anyone that is helping folks become financially stable. Something that's going to be coming up starting at the first of the year. Through tax season, we have the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. And celebrating all the folks that help with that is one example of increasing the financial stability for all people.
All right, and I'm sure that for anyone wanting to contribute to the community, either with their time or with their resources, the United Way would be a really good place to get started and get you plugged in if you are looking for a way to make a difference in our community. And I've got the official proclamation here for you. Thank you very much. Oh, all right. Thank you. All right. Item 3.2.
3.2, recognition of November 11th, 2021 as Veterans Day in the city of Salina. Kathy McCandless will read the proclamation.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. I have a Veterans Day proclamation here. Whereas on November 11th of each year, we pay tribute to those who served this great nation as members of our armed forces, and whereas this holiday initially commemorated at the end of World War I, which came at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. The national holiday was established as Armistice Day in 1938. In 1954, President Dwight D. Eisenhower renamed the holiday to Veterans Day to thank and honor all those who have served in the military during war or peacetime. Whereas veterans continue to serve their communities as small business owners, civic leaders, first responders, volunteers, mentors, and in countless other roles as professionals. Whereas we set aside this day to recognize the personal sacrifices American heroes have made to defend our Constitution and the freedoms it guarantees. Some members of our veteran population experience homelessness, mental health disorders, and other challenges after military service. We must continue to support these veterans and address these important issues. Whereas, in the words of President Dwight D. Eisenhower, history does not long entrust the care of freedom to the weak or the timid. Our veterans are brave and selfless individuals who deserve our respect and undying gratitude for their actions past, present, and future. Whereas, with respect for and in recognition of the contributions of our servicemen and women that have made, whereas with respect for and in recognition of the contributions our servicemen and women have made to the cause of peace and freedom around the world, I, Melissa Rose Hodges, Mayor of the City of Salina, Kansas, do hereby proclaim November 11th, 2021 as Veterans Day in the City of Salina and urge all citizens to remember the service and sacrifice of our veterans who defend our freedom and preserve our way of life. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and affixed the seal of the city of Salina this 8th day of November, 2021.
Thank you so much, Ms. McCandless, and thank you for helping us coordinate
You are welcome.
today's proclamation and the color guard. I really appreciate
You're very welcome.
all the help you gave to staff. Are there going to be any ceremonies or services marking Veterans Day this Thursday that members of the public can participate in?
Yes, we will still continue to have our service in Sunset Park.
Okay,
It will be at 11 o'clock
right.
on November the 11th, and we would appreciate anyone who would like to come out and participate in that service that would be great.
All right, so 11 o'clock on Thursday, Sunset Park at the
Yes.
beautiful Veterans Memorial area. It's a lovely service. For those of you who haven't been, I'd highly encourage you. And thanks to all our native sons and daughters of Salina who have or are still serving in one of our branches of military service. Thank you so much for your sacrifice. And I've got
Thank
your
you.
signed proclamation here if you'd like it.
Thank you.
Item 3.3.
3.3, recognition of the month of November 2021 as Native American History Month in the city of Salina. Keely Denning, Shawnee Nation member and descendant of Blue Jacket, will read the proclamation.
Good afternoon. My name is Keely Denning. I reside here in Salina. I am a survivor of Indian boarding school. There's absolutely nothing and no one I fear, except for public speaking. So bear with me through this, please. November is a very busy month for Native people. Not only is this considered the month that we are recognized as a people, but it is also a very important month for harvest and for our veterans. Our veterans are so very important to us. Veterans include police officers, sheriff's officers, EMS workers, for they are on the line of duty for all of us. So I'd like to make a public statement and say thank you. I am a family from veterans. My uncle was killed at the Battle of Brest. My dad joined World War II at the age of 16 and fought. So it is a very, very special time for me. Okay, was that the spirits talking? So this is a very special month for many, many reasons, and I am very honored to be here today. Whereas during National American Heritage Month, we celebrate the rich tapestry of indigenous people and honor their sacrifices which are woven into the history of this country. And whereas Native Americans are descendants of the original indigenous inhabitants of what is now the United States. And Native Americans have moving stories of tragedy, triumph, perseverance that need to be shared with future generations. And whereas Native Americans have enriched our heritage and continue to add to all aspects of our society through their culture and the continued practice of teaching economic, environmental, and cultural sustainability. And whereas during the month of November, we honor our Native people in their ancestral homes, and recognize their continued contributions in strengthening the fabric of our society. Now, therefore, I, Melissa Rose Hodges, Mayor of the City of Salina, do hereby proclaim November the 21st, or November 2021 as Native American Heritage Month, and encourage all citizens to join in this observation. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Salina to be affixed this 8th day of November, 2021. Mayor Melissa Rose Hodges.
Thank you so much, and thank you also for going to the time and the trouble to wear your beautiful native dress. It's just, for those of you who haven't seen it up close, it's absolutely, the beadwork is exquisite.
And right now it weighs 50 pounds.
And it weighs 50 pounds, and you got through your public speaking, so I'd say all around a pretty successful
Yeah, I'm
day.
missing 20 pounds of beadwork. I opted out of that one.
I do have your signed proclamation for you if you'd like to come forward. Thank you so much for being here today. I really. All right, I think we're going to get a picture. You didn't know you were agreeing to that, too? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, item 3.4.
3.4, recognition of Scout Troop 2 earning their Citizenship Merit Badge in the community. Joe Hay, former commissioner and longtime Scout volunteer, will read the proclamation.
Madam Mayor, Commissioners, whereas citizen participation is the cornerstone of democracy, and whereas the Boy Scouts of America have promoted the development of youth leaders and good citizens since 1910, and whereas sponsored by the First Presbyterian Church, Troop 2 was founded in 1916 and is one of the oldest scout troops in the United States. Whereas scouts working toward their Eagle Badge are encouraged and need to complete the Citizenship in the Community Merit Badge, which helps scouts identify good citizenship, the community, and encourages discussions of the rights, duties, and obligations of the citizenship, as well as how scouts can demonstrate good citizenship in their community, scouting unit, place of worship, or school. Now, therefore, the governing body welcomes Troop 2 to the November 8th, 2021 City Commission meeting, congratulates them on doing the work to earn the Citizenship in the Community Merit Badge, and encourages their continued participation in local government. Melissa Hodges, Mayor.
Thank you so much, and welcome back, Mr. Hay. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the other activities that the Scouts are going to be pursuing to complete?
Well, our next big one, we hope, if COVID doesn't mess it up, we're going to have a big chili feed, would be the 28th of January, and hope everybody can make it. We didn't have it last year because of
Right.
COVID, so hopefully it will work out this year. Other than that, the boys are working on more of the required merit badges, and we're camping every month, and still enjoying the outdoors.
Awesome. Well, welcome to all the Scouts from Troop 2 that are here today. We're delighted to have you here, and please know that public participation includes you all as well. So whenever public comment is open, you all are more than welcome to come up to the podium and share your opinions with us as well. And I've got your signed copy here, Joe. Thank you so much.
Mayor, if I could make just a brief comment, I wanted to thank all the young men in the audience today. There's 2 or 3 of you that I know. I know you don't know me, but I know you. The very first city commission meeting that I ever attended was in this room for my Citizenship Merit Badge, and we've had roosters crowing and we've had dogs barking today, but that particular day, there was an ordinance that was being protested about the banning of Vietnamese pot-bellied pigs, and we in fact had a pot-bellied pig in the room that day. But anyway, I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm a proud Eagle Scout, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't incorporate something positive for my days in scouting into how I sort of guide my day or my decision-making process. And so I know this is a challenging environment. It's tough to keep going through Scouts when there's a lot of other pressures with sports and other activities. And I would just encourage you guys to stay in it as long as you can and enjoy yourselves. I certainly miss my days camping, and in fact was camping out at our family farm this weekend, and had to hear from my brother, who's also an Eagle Scout, that he could still build a fire better and faster than me. And but anyway, it's a great organization, and I appreciate you guys and your leaders being here today. So
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. With that, we will proceed to Citizens Forum. Citizens Forum is an opportunity for any member of the public, including our Scouts here today, to speak on an item that doesn't appear on today's agenda. I'd ask that you identify yourself by your first and last name. Let us know where you're from, and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. And with that, I'll open up Citizens Forum, and we'll start with those that are here present in the room today, and then turn to our virtual audience if there are any members that would like to speak with us via Zoom. Oh, please.
Clark Sanders, 2096 Leland Way, Salina, Kansas. Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. I'll keep this short. The unofficial results of the election, including the yes/no vote, are in. Traditionally, when the official results come in about a week, there will not be many changes. One thing that could change, however, is the order of finish in the City Commission election. What won't change will be who will be serving on the next City Commission come January. As it appears today, Bill Longbine and Greg Lenkowitz will have won 4-year terms, and Commissioner Mike Hoppick has been reelected to serve a 2-year term. Congratulations, Mike. Another thing that won't change in any significant degree is that the citizens of Salina have voted yes to the proposed ordinance on the ballot by a convincing margin of approximately 13.5%. The will of a clear majority of the voters is that we want the proposed ordinance to happen. Now, based on these facts, I am asking the Commission to vote today, or as soon as possible, to drop the lawsuit against the petition and its author. If that is not the will of this Commission to do that, then I would request that a delay in the ruling of the court be requested of the court by this current Commission, so that the new Commission, which will be seated in about 2 months, can decide if they want to continue the lawsuit or not. This has been a divisive issue. But now the results are in, and it's time for the healing process to begin. And it makes no sense to stay on a path that will continue to divide the citizens of this community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sanders. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Norman Mantle, Salina, Kansas. This concerns government. At the World Conference on Global Warming last year in Glasgow, Scotland, a world leader said, we need more forests, more trees. For every tree you cut down, you contribute to global warming. Building housing and factories out of wood and other materials contributes to global warming. As the population increases, so do our problems increase. Greta Thunberg was one of the speakers there at that meeting. Science is telling us we've got about 10 years to get it right.
Thank you, Mr. Mantle.
Dalton McDowell, City of Salina. I haven't done it lately, but I have requested an open meetings request or an open records request that gets, I don't know where it gets took or whatever. But I'm gonna do another one. And if I don't get it in 24 hours from the time I send it to who I'm gonna send it to, I'm calling the Attorney General's office. Ask Wichita what happens when you don't give me what I want and it's open meetings act request. Another thing, 5th Street down by Salina Regional, their parking garage by Salina Regional on 5th Street, and then the water treatment plant is right next to it. Right now with them doing the asphalt work on the parking lot at Salina Regional, I understand. But it's just not then. It's worse now because they have a bunch of parking spots that are getting re-asphalted. But that's a death trap when you try to take anything smaller than a compact car, and if you have somebody coming at you from the other way, there is no place to get over. If you don't see them before I don't know what's that next street there that runs east-west, you can't really see it. You're screwed. You're committed, and if it's big enough, you're going to have an accident because there's no room to get over Monday through Friday. Can we do something with the parking situation on 5th Street?
Thank you. That is a very hazardous street. I speak from experience. In terms of the Freedom of Information Act, I know that staff does their best to comply, so hopefully you'll get the information that you're requesting. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Kevin Korb, Salina. Representative Sanders said most of what I came here to say, but I just wanted to add on a little bit. I would also like to urge you guys to reconsider the lawsuit in light of now the fact that we have on record what the public opinion is, what the majority opinion is. I would ask you, if you continue this lawsuit, who are you really fighting on behalf of? It's not the majority of the citizens that have spoken.
Thank you, Mr. Korb.
Good afternoon. My name is John Blanchard. I live in Salina. I won't reiterate all the election talk we had, but just to say that it was a great turnout. Thank you to everyone who ran, because it really does take a lot of commitment to run for office. Also, congratulations to those of you that were elected. Also, congratulations to the people who advocated for the ordinance. They got out, they hustled, they did a pretty remarkable job if you really look at it. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about two other things that were in the major topics of the election, and one in particular. The first one is about jobs, and I appreciate you, Mayor, putting into the record my comments on the public hearing last week. I was unable to be here. But I was surprised to find out that Schwann's went from 1,700 jobs in 2019 to 825 currently. That's a drop of 900 jobs in 2 years. Add that with 490 jobs lost between Rev and Signify. That's, for me, that's a little concerning, especially when we're talking about new jobs committed to with incentives of only 325 over the next 3 to 5 years. My main concern here, though, is a related topic, and that is our housing emergency. I found out last Tuesday evening, watching the Planning Commission meeting, that the Magnolia Pointe's 168-unit apartment deal by Menards was dead on arrival. That was, to say the least, shocking. I reached out to the mayor and vice mayor on Wednesday and to see if I could get an update and what was going on with that. I heard back from the mayor. She provided me just today with an update from the city manager. And there are a lot of parts of that update that I find very troubling. On May 3rd, as you know, you made official that this was an emergency. So let me just conclude by saying we're in the position now where we have been before, and that is, how did we get here? Why didn't we see this coming? And where do we go from here? I hope that you will address all of those in the very near future, being that this is an emergency, because it's about accountability. So who knew what, and when did they know it? When did the city manager find out? When did he inform individual commissioners or the commissioners as a group? This past election, I believe, was more about a vote yes for no confidence, and I voted no on the ordinance, but I'm a yes vote for no confidence. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I was going to request of my fellow commissioners, given that we've acknowledged that we have a housing crisis, a housing emergency, call it what you will. I had planned either to bring up under other business the information we got on Magnolia Pointe in this morning's city manager update, but I would like to officially add it to the agenda if there's any support for doing that, so that we can talk through and let the public, share with the public what we do know about the fact that we are not getting the 168-unit Magnolia Pointe apartment complex that was to be located by Menards.
Move that that discussion be added to the agenda. Exactly where, I guess it would come after development business. It probably is part of the development business, actually, as 8.2.
Do we have a second?
Second that.
We have a motion and a second to add agenda item 8.2, a discussion regarding Magnolia Pointe. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes 5-0. Is there anyone else here today who would like to speak at Citizens Forum?
Good afternoon, Commission. Chad Farber, Salina, Kansas. Congratulations, Commissioner Hoppick, on your re-election this past week. Commissioner-elect Longbine is in the crowd as well, and congratulations to him, and Mr. Linkowitz, Greg Linkowitz as well. I'm very disappointed to hear about the housing situation over there, Magnolia Pointe, but I'll save those comments for that agenda item a little bit later. As Representative Sanders mentioned, as Kevin mentioned as well, the will of the people has been stated on this issue with the ordinance, and I'm going to take it a step farther. I'm going to ask one of you as commissioners to step up today, add this to the agenda if need be, and make a motion that we go forward with this ordinance that has been voted on by the will of the people. I understood exactly what direction you took a while back when you said, let's wait a little bit, make sure everything is in line. I think now overwhelmingly you see the will of the people, and I would ask that you as a commission enact the will of the people with this ordinance that is in there. Another thing that was brought up, it has been a very divisive issue in our community, and I'm hoping after this is over that we can all come back together as a city and move forward with this. This commission has kind of brought this on themselves with some of the decisions in the past. I realize, Commissioner Peck, you didn't have anything to do with that over the last couple of years. You just got drug into all of this. But I am asking for one of you as commissioners to step up, to do the right thing today, and make a motion that we just adopt this ordinance as it is written, as per the will of the people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Farber. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to the commission today? And is there anyone online? Nope. Mr. Farber, Mr. Sanders, and Mr. Korb, I do hear your request, and just to let you know, city staff, city council has never advocated a particular position or point of view. They've given us the facts that we needed to make a decision in terms of pursuing a lawsuit regarding this ordinance. Since the ordinance has passed last week, I think it's probably, if it wasn't understood by all the members of the governing body, I think it definitely is now, that if one of us were to want to revisit that decision, that we do have that option. We always know that that's on the table. So at any rate, thank you very much for your comments. It's a course of action to consider, and we'll see what the will of the governing body is. So thank you very much. Let's see. We don't have any public hearings or items scheduled for a certain time, so we will move on to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of November 1st, 2021.
Any issues with the minutes of November 1st, 2021? And if not, I would accept a motion to approve them.
Mayor Hodges, I move we approve consent agenda item 6.1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of November 1st, 2021. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes 5-0. I apologize, Commissioner Ryan, I forget about the delay, and I don't mean to cut you off.
Doing a nice job, Mayor.
Well, you just, if I do, just feel free to call me out and we'll back up a little bit. Item 7.1.
7.1, approve ordinance number 21-11087, amending Chapter 38, Article 1 of the City of Salina Code by adopting the 2021 Standard Traffic Ordinance for Kansas Cities, published by the League of Kansas Municipalities.
Ms. Trocek.
Hello, good afternoon, Mayor Hodges, Commissioners. It's nice to see all of you. I will preface my comments by stating that the 2020 legislative session was a very shortened session, so there was not much activity for the Kansas League of Municipalities to review in determining what changes, if any, should occur with the standard traffic ordinance as well as the Uniform Public Offense Code. Having said that, they did certainly make up for that shortened legislative session by enacting and amending quite a few sessions in the standard traffic ordinance. As the Commission is aware, Chapter 38, Article 1 has adopted previously the standard traffic ordinance for Kansas cities as published by the Kansas League of Municipalities. This is published annually. Last year, there were no changes, but that was an atypical year. The STO handbook is modeled after the Kansas Uniform Act regulating traffic on the state's highways. And this book serves as the primary traffic enforcement handbook for the Salina Police Department. The League has published the 2021 edition of the STO handbook, which incorporates the amendments that were made during the 2021 legislative session. As a reminder to commissioners, we have 4 standing local amendments to the STO as published. That is the authority of police, which is amended to include community service technicians, parking officers, and other similar officials designated by the city manager as officials who are authorized to enforce the provisions of Article 13 related to stopping, standing, and parking. We have Section 33, the maximum speed limits, has been amended to address the needs of Salina. Section 85, stopping, standing, and parking, prohibited in specified places. We've amended that to include some additional areas, and Section 114.4, unlawful operation of a golf cart, has been amended by prohibiting the operation of a golf cart on any public sidewalk. I have attached a summary of the changes that were made during the 2021 edition of the STO. I'm not recommending any additions beyond that. I would be happy to take any questions about the changes that occurred or are recommended in the STO. This commission has 5 options before it. You can approve ordinance number 21-11087 on first reading. You can approve it with amendments as you deem appropriate. You can postpone consideration of ordinance 21-11087 to a specified date and time and provide staff direction regarding additional information or amendments the commission would like to request for your consideration. You can approve ordinance number 21-11087 on first reading and provide direction regarding additional information or amendments the City Commission would like to request for your further consideration at the time of second reading, or you can vote to deny ordinance number 21-11087.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Trocek? Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from members of the public? If not, I'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion or action.
Mayor Hodges, I move we approve ordinance number 21-11087 on first reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 21-11087 on first reading. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 5-0. Item 7.2.
7.2, approve ordinance number 21-11088, amending Chapter 25, Article 1 of the City of Salina Code by adopting the 2021 Uniform Public Offense Code for Kansas cities, published by the League of Kansas Municipalities, and repealing existing Section 25-1.
Thank you. Like the STO, the Uniform Public Offense Code for Kansas cities is published annually by the Kansas League of Municipalities. It again is modeled after the state criminal code. This book, the Uniform Public Offense Code, serves as the primary criminal ordinance enforcement for the Salina Police Department. The League has published the 2021 edition of the UPOC handbook, which incorporates amendments that were made during the 2021 legislative session. As a reminder, we do have some local ordinances that have been amended, including disorderly conduct. We've added a section to the disorderly conduct section. Section 10.5, unlawful discharge of a firearm. We have provided some exceptions in that section. Section 10.6, air gun, air rifle, bow and arrow, slingshot, BB gun, or paintball gun has been amended to establish, again, an exception. And Section 9.9.1, unlawful possession of marijuana, has been amended to address a requirement for evaluations for offenders under the age of 21 that is not contained within the language of the Uniform Public Offense Code. I have attached a summary of the changes to the 2021 edition of the UPOC. I am also making recommendations to the commission for sections contained within the UPOC. I am recommending to decline the adoption of sections 6.14 and 615. Those are sections that address some acts involving sewers, and this is based on the recommendation of the Director of Utilities. We have local ordinances now that probably better cover that type of activity, and it better fits the needs to Salina. And so the city prosecutor would be recommending that those sections not be adopted. For the same reason, I'm recommending that we decline adopting other sections, 10.13 barbed wire, 10.18, 10.24, 10.25, and 10.26, which all deal with the smoking ordinances or prohibitions. We again have those in our local code. And section 11.3, commercialization of wildlife. There's also an existing ordinance in Salina Code that covers this conduct more thoroughly and again in a manner better suited for the needs of Salina. The last section that covers the ordinances that I am recommending to the commission that we not adopt are sections contained within Article 7A, crimes affecting public trust, Section 6.17, criminal use of a financial card, Section 9.9.3, unlawful distribution of controlled substances, Section 9.9.4, unlawful possession of controlled substances, Section 9.9.6, distribution of non-controlled substance, Section 10.21, selling beverage containers with detachable tabs, and Section 11.15, permitting a dangerous animal to be at large. These are sections that, in my evaluation, municipal court probably doesn't have the sufficient staffing or resources to adopt these additional criminal ordinances. As the commission is probably aware, it has been within the last 4 years that we adopted the Uniform Public Offense Code, and that in and of itself did result in many more offenses being prosecuted in Salina Municipal Court than had traditionally been prosecuted. In addition to that, there were several ordinances that were enacted that it has challenged our caseload. With COVID, we have seen our caseloads be very manageable, but that is a trend that I expect to change. And so at this time, I don't feel that our resources are such, having one judge and one prosecutor in court, that we can enact these additional offenses. The prosecution position on this is that we refer these offenses, or ask the Salina Police Department to refer these offenses to the district court. So they are being prosecuted by a referral to the Saline County District Court. The recommended action or the commission action that can be taken today is, first of all, this commission can approve ordinance number 21-11088 on first reading. This commission can approve the ordinance with amendments as you deem appropriate. This commission can postpone consideration of the ordinance to a specified date and time and provide me direction regarding any additional information or amendments you would like to request for further consideration. This commission can approve the ordinance on first reading and provide direction regarding additional information or amendments the City Commission would like to request for further consideration at the time of the second reading, or you can vote to deny ordinance number 21-11088.
Thank you very much, Ms. Trocheck. Any questions?
Just one on section 9.1, the disorderly conduct, I think letter D. What's the difference between disorderly conduct in this regard versus littering on some? Is it just proving that person willfully was trying to irritate the owner of the property? I'm assuming there's a difference in the penalties.
The conduct is being committed with let me get my disorderly conduct section pulled up. It is a difference in what the intent of the perpetrator is with regard to littering, and that's subsection D of the disorderly conduct ordinance or section.
I'm guessing that there are different penalties.
So you would be performing the act in a manner that you know the act would alarm, anger, or disturb others, or provoke assault or other breach of the peace. And so that would be the difference between that subsection 4 that we add and the disorderly conduct statute that covers depositing of a substance on property with the intent to provoke an assault or disturb others.
So you'd have to prove that the person was attempting to provoke
You do, yes. I would be required to establish that.
Just out of curiosity, what's the penalty for that?
It's a Class C misdemeanor.
So,
So
and
the maximum
one who
sentence
tries
would
not to be
30
too
days.
familiar with those.
I'm glad you aren't. The maximum sentence would be 30 days, and the maximum fine would be up to $250.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from members of the public? Not seeing any online. I will bring it back to the commission for further discussion or action.
Mayor, move approval of ordinance number 21-11088 on first reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 21-11088 on first reading. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 5-0. Item 8. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's an annual thing we get to go through, updating all of that. Item 8.1.
8.1, authorize city staff to prepare a special assessment engineering feasibility report for phases 1 and 2 of Lakeview Estates Edition Number 2.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrew.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. This is a request or petition that was submitted by Mr. Stan Byquist. And as you're aware, we have a two-step special assessment financing process. And step 1 is coming before the commission to request authorization for staff to prepare an engineering feasibility report for public infrastructure. Your action tonight would not authorize the creation of a benefit district. It would authorize the applicant to utilize the special assessment financing process and have a feasibility report coming back to you at a future date. So we've summarized some of the steps in the residential subdivision review process. And so remaining steps after this evening would be approval of an actual benefit district petition, which would occur at a later time, and then actual construction of the utilities. With some of our other subdivisions, we've had discussions about perimeter road improvements being done as part of that. The good thing about this location is South Ohio is already approved to city street standards, so the only benefit district that's being proposed is for internal improvements. This is a 34-acre site. It's on the east side of South Ohio. Mr. Byquist is proposing to create a mixed-use subdivision that would consist of townhomes backing up to the lake, multifamily apartments, an assisted living memory care facility, and a proposed office site. So Mr. Byquist currently owns all the property. He's seeking your approval to utilize special assessment financing to construct the necessary public improvements to make this property developable. And he is seeking it for the entire development, even though it will be developed in a first phase and a second phase. On page 3, we summarize for you some of your recent approvals, and those include Phase 1 of Magnolia Hills Estates that had 29 lots, Sweetland Valley that had 29 lots, Phase 2 of Stone Lake that had 17 lots, Phase 3 of Stone Lake that has 45 lots, most recently approved benefit district financing for Phase 2 of Cedar Ridge Edition, and you approved the preparation of a feasibility report for Phase 2 of Magnolia Hills Estates. As we noted, this is going to be done in 2 phases, with the assisted living facility would be done in the first phase with a stub street constructed off of Ohio Street, and there would be a looped water line that would connect back to Stone Lake that would create a loop system to start out with in Phase 1. On pages 4 and 5, we have the life cycle maintenance costs that are estimated for street improvements and for utilities. At your last meeting, there was a request that staff try to provide some revenue information as to what sorts of property tax revenue would offset that. I would start by noting at your October 25th meeting, you approved the use of industrial revenue bonds for the assisted living facility. That, those industrial revenue bonds carry with it a 10-year property tax exemption, so there would be no property taxes collected on the assisted living facility for the first 10 years that it was in operation. What we have done is we have estimated, based on the current comparable values, that the apartments site, if developed fully, would generate approximately $56,000 in property tax annually if it was fully developed. The office site would generate $43,400 in property tax once fully developed. The 6 townhomes, as proposed, would generate $42,000 a year in property tax. So the total annual property taxes on full build-out would be $141,400, not including the assisted living facility. But when you're taking that into account of the total mill levy that's levied on this property, only about 22% of that is collected by the city. That goes to the city's mill levy, so that reduces the city's share to about $30,966 annually. That would be the city's share of that. So, and we've done some calculations. If full build-out was in year 5, over the 30-year life of the streets, the city would collect $774,000 in property tax to offset the street maintenance. If it took 10 years before full development, then the city would collect $619,000 over that period when we got to year 30 of the street life cycle. So those are the best estimates we have based on current value. Recalling that for residential, the assessment is 11.5% of appraised value, and for commercial, it's 25% of appraised value, and the city only gets 22% of the total taxes that are levied. The other thing, in the case of the utility lines and revenues, and consulting with the utilities director, because this is a unique subdivision and doesn't have any single-family dwellings in it, there's not a real comparable to look at what the monthly usage rates or monthly projections would be. But just as with our other subdivisions, the useful life of these utility lines would be estimated to be 60 years. As to the townhomes that would back up to the lake, the projected market price is $50,000 to $75,000 for those lots, and they're proposing to sell those townhomes in the $250,000 to $375,000 range. The plan is to build the assisted living facility first. The townhome area would be developed next, and then there's no identified users at this time for the multifamily lots, but there is a continuing need to have lots that are suitable for multifamily development. The applicant plans to use square footage to allocate the specials. This property has good connectivity with the hike-bike trail. It's accessible to Jerry Ivy Park. The rent rates for the assisted living and the future multifamily are unknown at this time. In terms of the debt management consideration, the Director of Finance indicates that the City of Salina is currently at 47% of its debt limit, and if the bonds were approved for issuance in this case, it would increase that from 47 to 48% of our debt limit. So your options this afternoon would be to Authorize staff to prepare an engineering feasibility report and resolution advisability for all of phases 1 and 2 of this proposed subdivision. You could authorize staff to prepare a feasibility report for phase 1 only, which is the assisted living facility portion. You could postpone consideration of this item to a future meeting and direct staff as to what additional information you'd like to receive, or you could vote to instruct staff not to proceed with preparing an engineering feasibility at this time. So with that, I'd be happy to address any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Andrew?
One, if this was recommended for phase, well, let me ask the question differently. Are there plans to build fairly immediately on phase 2, the townhouse?
The time frame that I was given when I met with Mr. Byquist was 2 to 5 years from now as far as the townhomes, but I would think he would be in a better position to answer that question than I would.
From a cost perspective, is long range, is it cheaper to do it all at once or to part?
Well, even if the financing is approved for the entire thing, they still plan to construct it in phases. They're not planning to construct all of the phase 1 and phase 2 improvements at one time. So what they plan to build in phase 1 is they would bring a street off of Ohio Street to access the assisted living facility, and they would construct a water line that would loop back and connect to Stone Lake, and they would build a sewer connection. Then in phase 2, they would build the rest of the street and provide utilities to the apartment site.
As the city, though, would be putting the financing, would it be less expensive for the city to do it all at once? Or to front the
In
finance?
terms of efficiency and time utilization, it would be more efficient for staff to prepare a feasibility report and to get the prices established for the entire infrastructure package as opposed to going back and doing it a second time.
Because I'm just thinking that if it's going to be done eventually anyway, just as soon, long range, do it the least expensive way.
Yes, I'd just rather have you hear the question of timing from Mr. Byquist and not from me. So.
Certainly.
Any other questions for Mr. Andrew?
Thank
you
you.
very much. And I think I saw the applicant here today. There he is. Mr. Byquist. I'd like to invite you to the podium for any remarks you have or to answer Commissioner Davis's question.
Stan Byquist, 2601 South Ohio. Thank you for seeing me and hearing this. Timing on the second phase, it depends on the market. If the housing market is red hot like it is now, it's very possible to go in next year. But the immediate concern is to get the memory center in, and that's why we phased it with the way we phased it. The other concern is with the apartment lots. It's a little hard to design for a multifamily if you don't have a customer and a design plan right now. And so those are the two real factors on phasing.
Would you have an estimate of the potential increase in costs we could see if those second and third parts, what you just described, came 2 or 3 years down the road?
The engineer from Caw Valley's here, Justin, and let me ask him real quick. Do you have any? Okay.
Justin Owens, Caw Valley Engineering, 742 Duval. It's really hard to estimate what economy of scale will do. Yeah, you'll probably get better prices is the assumption, but it's really difficult to try to get an idea of what that would actually be if you did, without bidding it separately.
And the reason I'm asking, one side of what I'm hearing is we're desperate for housing. It's an emergency. We need it now. And the other side says, well, let's see what the market forces dictate. And if the market forces suggest that we really don't need it now, it's not that urgent, I think we're getting kind of mixed signals. I mean, if there's really a community demand for housing that these projects would fulfill, I would hope that that timeline would be relatively short, in which case I would, unless you anticipate prices of the raw material going down, which probably is going to happen, it would be less expensive in the long run for us to just pay for it once. Now, obviously, I'm a little out of my area of expertise, so I'll invite comments from my colleagues, but
Personally, I would think you would go with what the developer requests. Again, whatever those costs are down the road, those are going to be passed on to whoever develops that, and then whoever buys those as far as spatial assessment. So I think I would just go with what the developer is requesting at this time.
I'm just looking at our I want to call it civic debt, but it's our legal debt limit. It's just slowly inching up.
Yeah, but 49% is still pretty low.
Well, if it helps,
As long as you got the money, it's like the guy who weighs 200 and all of a sudden he's 300. There's a point where it just starts to.
That counts, but again, this is debt that's not being paid for by the city. It's being paid for, only reason we would pay is if they default.
Right, but it's on our books as far as ability to bond more.
Well, with respect to the debt limit, we've had conversations with our financial advisors, and I think Pac's still here or not, but invite her to weigh in as well. But we've been advised that special assessment debt in and of itself doesn't count towards our debt limit, but our history of financing special assessment debt along with rolled into our debt issuances for other projects has caused it to count against our debt limit. So I'm actively trying to see whether we can do an accounting and back that special assessment debt out of that cap. And we've also had conversations about, well, maybe a little bit more cumbersome, should we go back to the older method of issuing standalone special assessment debt? The difficulty with accounting for and backing out prior issuances from our numbers is they've been refinanced. So it's not just that initial issuance that was rolled into an overall issuance, it's a refinancing, and it gets a little difficult to unwind all that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before you leave, Mr. Byquist, just following up on a question that Commissioner Davis raised, you'd indicated that, like with the apartment building, that you wanted to wait and see if there was a market there for those buildings. Correct? Did I interpret that?
No, we know there's a market there.
Okay.
But normally, when you develop, you are looking for a specific customer and a specific fit for the lot or lots that are involved. And when that happens, depending on whether someone comes in, and I'm just hypothetically, puts in 50 units or puts in 150 units, the main water line and sewer line will already be run. But now you have to tap into those and run to the property to service them. So when we do this, do we want to try and guesstimate what's going to happen on that spot of land, the actual fit of the building or buildings? It's a little difficult.
So in terms of, are you suggesting that you would get like an outside developer like the one that we were talking about for Magnolia Pointe, or for the nursing care facility? You'd probably have like an outside entity come in and do the development of
Yes.
of the apartment. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And So at this point, there's no sense of like a specific rent level or anything like that, because you said you hadn't identified the market at this point, so.
Well, I believe the housing studies that identified the market and the rates.
Okay,
And we are waiting for someone to step up.
okay.
I guess that takes me back to my original question. So
Yeah.
which message should I be, listen, I mean, if our need is that bad and the market forces are there, I mean, how aggressively is this being pushed to develop this
Well,
soon?
Well, once we get through the city process, Jeff Mays with Compro will go out and try to sell the apartment properties immediately. And as far as getting the Phase 2 in, that can be done in it can be started in 6 months and completed in less than a year, dealing with the contractors that I normally work
So
with.
there's no plan to deliberately delay the apartment part?
No, none.
Until the memory care unit is
No,
done?
none.
So they could proceed
They
simultaneously?
could go at the same time, absolutely. Hope they do.
Thank you very much. Any further questions for Mr. Byquist?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If it's helpful, as staff interacts with developers and tries to market the community and make known the need, we have varying developers that come in with a model that they're used to developing, and they'll tell us, I need a minimum of X number of acres, and my model is this many units, and we try to make them aware of platted ground that's listed, vacant ground, and try to assist them as they go through the community and try to select a site. But in the end, it's a somewhat of a project-specific decision, as well as a negotiated decision between the property owner and a prospective developer as the buyer. I think there's quite a bit of interest, but we can only provide information. I don't know that we can force the issue. And to that point, I don't know that we can make an applicant special assess property they don't want to special assess. We could deny a special assessment request in a punitive way, but I'm not recommending that, but I don't know that we could force an applicant to special assess property they don't otherwise wish to.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from members of the public on this item? And it doesn't look like we have anyone online here to comment, so we'll bring this item back to the commission for further discussion or action.
Mayor Hodges, I move we authorize staff to prepare an engineering feasibility report and resolution of advisability for all of phases 1 and 2 of Lakeview Estates Edition Number 2 for future consideration by the city commission.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to authorize city staff to prepare a special assessment engineering feasibility report for phases 1 and 2 of Lakeview Estates Edition Number 2. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 5-0. Which brings us to item 8.2, which was the item added in regard to Magnolia Pointe, and the recent information that we've been given that that development is not proceeding. I guess, I'm sorry, do you?
Just wanted
Maybe we need a
confirm whether
summary?
you'd voted to add that to the agenda.
Yeah.
Previously, you had.
I apologize. It was me that prompted the interruption with the
No,
question.
no,
I'm sorry.
no worries. At any rate, I appreciate the other members of the governing body acceding to that request. I earlier shared the concerns that we have at this point, what we've labeled as a housing crisis, and it would appear that all of these projects, whether we're talking about Mr. Byquist's project or Magnolia Pointe or the Drever group, they take a significant amount of time and effort to get underway, and the timelines are really, really long. And at this point, I think it would be helpful if we could hear from staff about where we're at in the process of the Magnolia Pointe apartment complex, which, as you will probably recall, was a 168-unit apartment complex that was going to be developed adjacent to Menards, and give us a little bit of information about that. I was not aware that there had been any issues with the development until I received an email from Commissioner Blanchard, former Commissioner Blanchard, that included a clip from the Planning Commission meeting, where at the end of the meeting, one of the planning commissioners appeared to ask spontaneously, hey, what's the update on this development? And the update is that it is not going forward. So I thought, in the interests of, we've had, like I said, we've had a lot of discussions about housing shortages in Salina. I know it was a big election issue topic about what we're doing to address that and what we're going to be doing to address it in the future. And I thought it was worthy of being placed on the agenda so that we can all get up to speed on what happened and where we see the process going from here. So I don't mean to put staff on the spot, although I realize that's exactly what I've done. I am hoping that you can give us a summary of where we are to date, and if there are other questions that the other members of the governing body have, I'd ask you to jump in and share those.
Sure, I'll do my best. I don't know that I'm prepared to say that it's not going forward, although there has been a snag that we're trying to see whether we can work through. As by way of background, the developer that developed the Menard site had more property than just the Menard site, and that project culminated with Menard's opening in 2011. I personally spent quite a bit of time, I don't know how much lead time leading up to the process of getting infrastructure design funded and the approvals in place to facilitate that, and I think it was years, but what I would tell you is that in May of 2010, so 6 to 12 months in advance of Menard's opening, the developer entered into what's called a Declaration of Reciprocal Easements and Operating Agreement between him as the developer and Menards as the tenant. I know there were negotiations that went on between the developer and selling that land to try to come to some type of an agreement with Menards. I don't know for sure. I think there was possibly favorable pricing to have them move in as the anchor tenant. But as it relates to the reciprocal easement and operating agreement, it includes a section that essentially provides that Menards has a list of prohibited land uses on the remainder of the property that the developer owned that Menards would have to consent to before it could be developed. Private agreement between the two parties, not something that that the city of Salina was a party to, and it has a list A through L. I'd also tell you very similar provision was in place for the Coles development, where the developer of Coles had similar provision, and there may be others that I may not be aware of, but the reason we're aware of those two is kind of the city's heightened role in those projects. So that agreement was in place. We were working, and then the developer has subsequently entered into negotiations with Perry Reed Group, who now owns Chapel Ridge and reserves at Prairie Glen, and is the applicant for the project that we're talking about is proposed. So,
And Mike, when you say developer, that's the owner of the ground, because it get correct?
Perry Reed, you mean?
No.
Or that
When you're-
Bob Eckholt?
Yeah, because
Yeah,
you keep
I'm
saying
sorry.
developer, but then there's a developer that I thought we ought to get that.
Right.
straight.
Bob Eckholt, I'm calling the developer of the Menards ground. Perry Reed Group is the proposed developer and operator of the apartment complex, the Magnolia Pointe project. And so I don't know the specific dates and all that. I may have to rely on other staff to flesh out some additional details. But the conversations were ongoing between Bob Eckholt and Perry Reed. They did call to our attention that they they needed to get Menard's consent. I think there was a pause in terms of our process. We didn't go forward while they worked through that. I took a call from the developer's realtor or real estate representative, and I wasn't sure where the conversation was headed. Based on my prior involvement with the project, I knew a point of contact with Menards and indicated, if you would like me to call them, let me know. They said, let us sort it out and we'll get back with you if we need your help. My understanding is not only were representatives of Bob Eckholt in contact with Menards, but attorney for Perry Reed was in contact with Menards. Subsequently, we were advised that they had reached an agreement amongst them in terms of agreeing to purchase material and give Menards an opportunity to bid on the project, and that second civil agreement between the two parties had been agreed to, and that Menards had consented, was my understanding. We then went through the approval process in terms of your action on the platting and the industrial revenue bonds, and were subsequently told that they were surprised by an additional procedural step on the part of Menards. Much like we're staff supporting you as a governing body, it sounds to me like they were in contact with staff and were not, and I don't know why, I don't know where the communication breakdown came from, but they weren't aware that Menards conducts a real estate committee process, and they are apparently the final arbiter of whether they consent or not. The real estate committee then responded that they wanted to hold out for retail development on the subject property where the apartments were proposed. At that point, communications ramped up. I was drawn into the middle of that conversation asking what can we do to help. I was out of the office for a week, but I reached out to that point of contact that I had, who kind of was the staff liaison for the whole process, had a conversation with them, tried to kind of convey not only is it just a real estate deal in terms of the two parties, but Salina has a unique housing need in terms of responding to our economic development successes recently. I don't know that I was all that persuasive. Got feedback, shared that with the developer and representative of Perry Reed. We've since continued to strategize. I've got a draft letter intended to send to the owner of Menards and the staff person in the real estate committee, just kind of reiterating the importance of the project, the communication breakdown that appears to happen. And one of the points I'm trying to make is they are a kind of a destination of choice. They drive customers in and of themselves, and a lot of our builders purchase from them. So if we can kind of clear the log jam for housing, and I'm in the letter just speculating. I said I can't back this up with definitive numbers, but it would seem to me that the material purchases from the apartment project and additional housing construction probably compare favorably to any spin-off benefit you might get from a retail neighbor. By way of that agreement between the parties, it is solely in Menards' discretion whether they wish to grant consent or not. I'm repeating myself just a little bit, but in my conversation with the attorney for Perry Reed, after they'd become aware that they didn't have the necessary approval, he seemed very sincere in that he personally was involved in that conversation. He had misunderstood. He sincerely believed they had the approval, and he had communicated that to us as if the necessary approval had been secured. That's about all I know to tell you.
I had a few questions. I mean,
I'm sorry. One other thing. In retrospect, the agreement that was in place between the two parties did not get a signed copy of that. We did rely on the developer and Perry Reed telling us that they had Menards' consent without independently verifying that.
gotcha. So that was indeed one of my questions. If we had a copy of either an agreement or a draft agreement that was signed between the two entities. You had mentioned reciprocal agreements, and we have other examples of those in the community. And I should probably be looking to my left here to the title person, but typically when you purchase a property or you're looking to purchase a property, is there any kind of information on, and I don't even know probably the appropriate vocabulary that sends up a red flag that, hey, wait a minute, yes, this property can be sold, but its uses are limited? Or is that kind of a caveat emptor thing, let the buyer beware, where you get your land and then all of a sudden
Well, actually,
you
if I
can't.
can start, I'll certainly defer to Commissioner Hoppick, but the agreement that I'm describing is recorded. It's recorded, and the parties were ultimately aware of it, and they thought they had secured the necessary approval from Menard. So I don't know that it's a function of a lack of awareness of the agreement.
Right.
It was proceeding on the basis that they thought they heard that Menard's consented, and they were wrong.
Hi, Mr. Skull.
Hi, Madam Mayor. I might add, too, that one of the reasons that the IRB request didn't go forward as early as July, following kind of initial conversations in May, was waiting for this agreement to come together. It seems to the Perry Reed found out kind of later in looking at the property that there was this deed restriction, but felt that they could overcome it. And then not until we did receive notice from them that an agreement had been reached. And I think to concur with what City Manager Scragg is saying, we would request an agreement signed in the future, though there's really no benefit to them moving forward without that agreement anyways. Just to kind of highlight a couple of things, the IRB action that was taken the other day is simply a resolution of approval to move forward with the process. You did not issue bonds. And having talked with bond counsel, if this deal does not go forward, as Commissioner Scragg said, there are some phone calls being made, and I think everybody's on the Perry Reed side is maybe hopeful there will be a change in their mind. So I don't know if there's fully a pin in it, but if that doesn't come to fruition, we would bring forward a repeal resolution for you that would essentially pull back your support of that. The Planning Commission actions taken on the property related to zoning, that was actually not a rezone, that's a conditional use permit. So the zoning exists as it always has been. The conditional use permit would essentially go away after 180 days if a building permit is not pulled related to that action as presented to the Planning Commission. Perry Reed has also noted that they are willing and very much want to build additional units here in Salina, so have already started to look at other properties if this doesn't work out.
Sounds like we might need to get him in contact with, is Mr. Byquist still here? And Mr. Mays isn't either. Well, there you go. Just to follow up, and I don't know if it's a question for Ms. Driscoll or Mr. Scragg, going forward in the future, how is this going to change our process? I mean, is that something where, and I understand that we haven't issued bonds yet, but we
put in a lot of effort.
You put in a lot of effort. You put in, I don't even want to know how much time that your office has put in on this. And I know that we also give you additional work or ask additional questions for you and your staff, and you're very much burdened under a tremendous workload. So I guess where I'm going with that is, how do we ensure that this doesn't happen in the future? Because there are so many worthy things that you could be spending your time on, that to see, you know, all of that effort come to nothing. What are we going to do in the future going forward to ensure that we don't end up in a similar position?
But I would offer a couple things. Number one, you know, ever since I arrived here in 2005, facilitating development's been a priority. And everything from yes somehow to concurrent processing of developments and applications. I mean, if we truly wanted to have a process that minimized staff effort, guaranteed certainty, everything would be consecutive. You wouldn't move to step 2 till you completed step 1. We made a deliberate decision quite some time ago that in the development community might tell you that it doesn't feel like it, but we made a deliberate decision quite some time ago that we're going to try to facilitate development with concurrent processing as much as we can. So Lauren and her staff already put in a lot of work trying to help speculative projects figure out whether they're going to go forward. Everything from the development review team meetings to running building permit reviews while planning items are up in the air. But having said that, I acknowledge that this one resulted in effort on the part of the Planning Commission and the City Commission that I guess at least could have been delayed or could have been avoided. And I think the honest answer to that is, believe it when you see it. We missed a stitch in terms of being told by the parties that Menards had consented, and we didn't require sufficient proof.
Madam Mayor, I would say too.
We thought it was forthcoming. I mean, I was under the impression, okay, everything's in the works, we're good to go. Once again, let's go, go, go.
As disappointed as we are, they're equally disappointed. They have a lot of money on the line. I mean, have gone forward with drafting documents, legal hours, pursuing, this property, and has taken time away from their own staff. In the development world, you kind of look at some of this as who's leading the effort, right? There was equal effort on Perry Reed's part. I mean, they were developing the documents, they were preparing those types of things, and they had risk on the line. And typically, they don't want to be in this position. In fact, they held out for weeks, not wanting to be in front of you and having this happen. So I think we were all very surprised when Menards noted that they had this additional executive level to make the decision. These things do happen sometimes in development. Some people say it's not over until it's over, right? I definitely think one of the things we've learned from this is, the first question we ask now, not maybe first, is there a deed restriction? It's not typically something that comes up in our purview. It's usually something that comes up in title, and hopefully a good realtor shares that. But if there are those types of agreements between property owners, I think before we pursue anything further, we would ask for that agreement to be in writing. And I think it's probably the best lesson we can learn from this. And I'm hoping that, as Perry Reed has indicated, they're going to take their efforts they've had and at least put those back into the community and look for a different site.
Well, that's very reassuring to hear. Something that Ms. Driscoll just referenced and was also referenced in the city manager update that we received this morning is that phone calls are being made. And it looked like that there was an indication on the part of the Perry Reed group that they wanted city staff to contact Senator Moran's office. And I have some concerns about that for many reasons. First is, obviously, in your report, you said this is a private agreement between two parties. The second is that I feel like even involving Senator Moran in something like this means that we would potentially lose another opportunity where we might need his advocacy more than on this housing project. So I just wondered what the process was in terms of reaching out directly to Senator Moran's office for help or not with this.
Maybe I wasn't clear enough in my report. Number one, to clarify, it wasn't a request of the Perry Reed group, it was a request of the property owner.
Okay.
And so my response was, not going to do that. If you want to contact Senator Moran, you're welcome to do that. And if you want to refer, and if Senator Moran has any interest, you want to refer him back to me for details or clarity or clarification, go ahead and do that. But my intention was not to take the lead.
To generate that request ourselves.
And for the record, I also said no. Passed along the same information. No one on my staff has talked to anybody at Senator Moran's office on behalf of this project. And those requests to make phone calls did come from the property owner. My staff and myself have not made any phone calls on behalf of that project outside of talking to the respective parties involved in the deal to understand what was truly going on. I conveyed that to City Manager Scragg, who then made a phone call as a follow-up just to kind of understand from the city's perspective. And he made that call to his contact, as he noted, at Menards.
Gotcha. I think this is about my last question. When did we hear about the deal falling through?
I heard about 2 weeks ago that there was concerns that Menards had this additional process and they were not sure how they were going to go. We've kind of stepped back a little bit, kind of waiting, because what was relayed to us both from the property owner and from Perry Reed was, there was additional process, then found out there was a denial, and then this, an effort to try and reconvene that board to have additional conversations with them.
I directly was having conversations with the property owner and Perry Reed about, what happened, what have you been told? Here's what I was able to find out from the point of contact with Menards and the brainstorming, a response to get to the point that we are right now. What I've offered to do is a letter on my letterhead over my signature, just kind of reiterating from our perspective as a community how important it is to us and asking them to reconsider. I don't know if that will be persuasive or not.
And I've suggested to Perry
It might be nice to, when you get a chance, it might be nice to see a copy of that letter. And then, at what point, I guess, my question is, at what point if, a planning commissioner hadn't asked for an update, at what point was the commission going to be brought into the loop, first of all, that this project was running into some difficulties, and then ultimately that it didn't look like those difficulties were going to be resolved?
I wasn't aware that it came up in the planning commission meeting, but I intended to share it as part of this update, the update that I sent today.
And I had also asked Perry Reed when they felt like the project was truly dead. I guess I hadn't really thought to convey in writing that things were going sideways, because it can all change in the blink of an eye in development. So, Perry Reed asked to have some more conversations with Menards, and we said when they kind of were ready to give up the ghost to let us know, and I had suggested they do a press release and then something formal to the commission to identify, what their next course of action would be. I think staff was looking at not kind of over-communicating anything at this point, because there are other properties that they may be looking at, so we were not trying to affect any of their decisions.
And then I would add, my conversations were right up to the end of the day on Friday, and then email through the weekend, in terms of still trying to piece together who'd spoken with representatives of Menards, what kind of feedback had they gotten, and what was the suggested path forward.
Well, and I will admit, I feel like a prize idiot, because I had a member of the community come to me 2 weeks ago and say, hey, this deal's in trouble. And I was like, no, this deal's solid. This deal's going through, we've already done X, Y, Z. If there were an issue with, catching something that is, not a permitted use, or that Menards has to sign off on, we would have caught that months ago. So I guess what I'm saying is that I feel like this conversation has been out there in the community, and I can't speak for other members of the governing body, but the first time I heard about it was when, just through an email that was forwarded to me with planning commissions, with a planning commission question. And that just, I don't know, that sits wrong. This is such an important issue, and we've put so much effort and so many resources in getting it going, and now it looks like potentially another building season is going to be passed by before we can get, another project off the ground, whether it's with the Perry Reed Group at an alternate location or Mr. Byquist's plans. It's like, if the housing situation is as dire as we've been told it is, it's just a tremendous missed opportunity.
And I'll take responsibility for the communication. I didn't anticipate it taking on a life of its own like it did. I was trying to work on it like we do many other deals in terms of trying to bring all the parties together. With respect to the housing situation, I've praised Lauren for multiple times that I feel like we are trying to be on the leading edge of this issue as much as we can. We are merely facilitators. We can't make property owners sell at an agreeable price. We can't make property owners invest in infrastructure in advance. We can't make apartment developers fit their project on a site that doesn't suit them. There are so many variables, but what Lauren and her staff have been doing is gathering all the information, making the sales pitch to anyone that'll listen, providing all the information that they ask for to try to facilitate a positive decision. But ultimately, it's their capital and their decision.
Right, and for example, the Drever Group, and I mean, they stood right here and said, hey, the whole reason we even came back here is because of Ms. Driscoll and her enthusiasm and her insistence. And I guess I would just like to know, and doesn't necessarily need to be tonight, but their study session was on October 4th, which was about 5 weeks ago, and they had indicated that they'd be getting back to us. And so if we could have an update on the Drever Group's proposal, that's the other one that's...
And just to be clear, we are not in control of the Drever Group's proposal.
Right.
It's not as if we have it in our possession and we're withholding it from you.
No.
We've yet to receive it.
Thank you. Are there any commissions or any questions from other members of the commission? Since we did place this item on the agenda, there is the opportunity for public comment. Are there any questions or comments from members of the public?
Hi, John Blanchard, Salina. Since I'm the one that brought this up, I thought I'd come up and say that I am utterly shocked that your staff knew about this since July, that there was an issue, there may be a problem with this thing, and didn't say anything about it. But I'll tell you what's even more, I'll go back to the election. I think the yes vote, no vote, a lot of it was about accountability. Elections are about accountability. The voters held the governing body accountable. When are you guys going to start holding management accountable? This is probably one of several issues that have been, the ball has been totally dropped. And Commissioner Peck, I topped out at Weeblos. You're an Eagle Scout. You've been a former commissioner, former mayor. I don't know that actions like this has ever happened before, where staff continually keeps bad news from the governing body until it's absolutely necessary. You mentioned 2 weeks ago, you knew that the whole thing was over, and they still didn't say anything to governing body. We had an election where this was a huge issue. And I just kind of want to clear up one thing. Did all of you find out about this for the first time this morning? Or did some of you know about this beforehand? In particular, Commissioner Hoppick, did you know about this beforehand?
Yes, I did.
When did you know about it? Because there was an election where there was an awful lot of bragging about having secured this project. How long have you known about this?
I don't know, a week or so. I got
during the
heard about
campaign,
it.
before the election?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I'm
again,
glad I wasn't on the ballot, because I would have been very upset if I would have known that city staff held from the public and other candidates information that other candidates were using as major accomplishments in their terms. And I'm not just pointing you out. I'm just saying it from the standpoint of the voters can only hold you guys accountable. When are you going to hold staff accountable? And I tell you what, I hope that the city manager will release the full city manager update, because I think it ended with, yeah, I don't see much hope in this thing, but you guys are sure selling hope right now. And the other thing that bothered me is that you had said that you had committed to writing a letter. Did you base that commitment? If none of these folks knew about a letter that you were going to write, what did you base your commitment on? And so I just think it's time to hold people accountable. Thank you.
And I'd like to answer to that. First of all, made a comment about this being a problem back in July. I don't believe, did staff know this was a problem back in July?
You know, the point was
We
that
knew that, I believe they knew there
they
was
were
a,
working on this.
there was
thing.
a document out there, but I don't know if anybody thought it was an issue.
What I think
not.
what Ms. Driscoll was saying is we knew that they were in direct conversation with Menards, and it wasn't until July that they told us that Menards had consented, let's take it forward.
Right. And the other thing is, we as a city are not in the negotiating part of this, and the developer and the Perry, when I say developer, the owner and the Perry Reed Group, as far as I understood, what I heard last week was they were still negotiating this. So I'm not even sure it is a dead deal yet. So that's, to say it's a dead deal, I mean, it has a bump in the road, and it may not come to be. But again, that's it's just part of the development. It's not we're not negotiating that. We don't own the ground. And also, to go back to your comment about Schwann's earlier about the 825 jobs, I believe that was the minimum jobs for the IRBs. That's not where they're at now. I believe they're at 1,100 employees, if I remember right.
Okay, any other questions or comments from members of the public?
Chad Farber, Salina. I was on the ballot, and Commissioner Hoppick, I hold you in high regard, and I hope with everything inside of me that you were not holding on to this information to undermine the other candidates. Not an accusation. Again, I have a lot of respect for you. We talked even before the candidacy and everything. One of the things I have heard over the last several months with this election upcoming is that there's a problem with transparency within our local government. And this seems to be another incidence of staff having information and the governing body either not knowing or not passing that information along to the public. I mean, let's go back to the whole fire department thing. We haven't heard anything about that in a while. I believe the mayor asked for some input on that, and it was shot down. There was nothing brought up about that. And I don't want to hear it's a personnel deal. It's taxpayer money. We need an accountability for that money, and we need to know who knew about what was going on. Mayor Hodges, former Mayor Hoppick, if this went on underneath your watch, you need to get that information out so that the public is not thinking that you are complicit in what has been going on behind the scenes. There needs to be some transparency. There needs to be some accountability. There needs to be some answers. How long has the city manager or staff or whoever, how long have they been sitting on this information about this project? How long did they sit on the information about the fire department? There needs to be some answers. We, the people, want answers. It's a shame that it had to come out in a planning commission by a simple question. And we are in a housing crisis. We are. I mean, I see other realtors sitting in the crowd today. They'll vouch for that. We are in a housing crisis, and I know we're all disappointed. I hope we're all disappointed that this is in dire straits, it seems. But I think more importantly than that, we need some accountability as to what is going on within the city. I'd love to hear some answers as to timeline, as to how long this has been going on. Commissioner Blanchard brought up I didn't hear the July date, but if this has been going on since July, at least you should have received some of that information and been able to pass that along. I'm frustrated, as you can tell. I'm assuming there are many here who are frustrated about this situation as well, but thanks for letting me speak anyway.
Thank you very much, Mr. Farber.
If I could just speak, I guess a couple things come to mind. So regarding the project that we have been discussing here next to Menards, I found out that project was dead today. This is the first I've heard of that. So There certainly is not collectively a group of commissioners sitting up here that happen to know this information and we're hiding it. I don't think there's anything nefarious going on. I think city staff explained the process pretty well about how it unfolded, and I have absolute trust that that's exactly how it happened. But I don't disagree with you, Chad, in terms of, or John, in terms of holding staff accountable as well. There are some things that, as a commissioner, I look at and say, yeah, we need some answers, fire department being one of those things. It's probably time for an update. I agree with that, and I still think there's a lot of accountability to be held there. But there's other things that once the ball gets rolling on something like that, all of a sudden the public perception becomes almost like there's a conspiracy about everything, and I don't adhere to that. So regarding the project we've discussed today, I have full faith that it basically played out exactly as staff has said, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I do regret that it was brought to light kind of with an offhand question in a planning commission meeting. That's unfortunate, but I also fully believe that we were going to be updated today regardless of that. And again, this is the first I learned about it, was an email earlier today. So I think there's plenty of fortitude up here amongst the commission to hold staff accountable when we need to. But I think there's a lot of conspiracy right now and trying to buy into maybe some things that aren't really there. So
One other timeline item that might be helpful. The conversation I had with a representative with Menards was 4 p.m. on Tuesday the 2nd. So that was my first opportunity to hear from Menards where they stood on this consent. And everything that I described to you in terms of conversation and attempting to find a way forward occurred from Tuesday through this morning.
Thank you for that clarification. Since there's no action to be taken on this item, if everyone has spoken their under public comments, we will go on to other business. Our final item of the day, I'm sure much to the relief of the scouts that we've got here today. Thank you very much for your patience. I do want to, the only item I have under other business is to offer my heartiest congratulations to the new members of the Salina City Commission. We have Commissioner-elect Bill Longvine in the audience today, so you might want to give a wave and so people can get to know you, Bill. Good job. And we also have new Commissioner Greg Lankowitz. He's not here, or at least I don't see him today. And then congratulate Commissioner Hoppick on his reelection. So at any rate, the commission will change in January, and we'll have a very hardworking, talented group of people leading us for the next 4 years. Is there any other business?
2 years.
2 and 4.
Some 2, some 4.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I do have an update. I had to step out earlier to take a phone call, and that was with Lieutenant Governor Toland. He relayed to me, he was aware of our Star Bond project, and you may have seen where the governor has announced her intention to propose rolling back the sales tax on food items, and they recognize the impact that it will have on Star Bond projects that have retailers that would have that sales tax rolled back, since the Star Bond project and the financials project being able to capture that and direct it to the Star Bond financing. So what he indicated was that the governor is committed to holding that harmless. That doesn't mean the sales tax would stay in effect in a Star Bond district if the legislation was passed, but that alternate funding at the state level would need to be found. So he just wanted to relay that and thought that might be, it was something that we've been discussing today in response to the governor's recent announcement, but that's what we know at this point.
Thank you. Anything else? If not, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion is second to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.